right, Craig. Good evening. Welcome to the March 12th, 2015 meeting of the Sherborn Board of Selectmen. We'll ask our town administrator to read the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, we'll vote to approve or amend the agenda and add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. Then we'll have a public comment period. Then we have one liquor license, a one-day liquor license to look at for trivia night for the Friends of Sherborn Library. Then at 6:30, we'll have an executive session to discuss potential litigation as it pertains to Mercurio versus Town of Sherborn. And then when we come back, we'll have a fiscal year 2016 budget review. And we'll look at the police department, building inspector, treasurer, clean up any other budgets if needed, and look at the Board of Selectmen model and the town budget model and review revenue assumptions with the town accountant. And then we'll look at the 2015 annual town meeting warrant, consider support of various articles or consider any other warrant changes, finalize that warrant, and then go to routine business, town administrator report, selectmen reports set at the next meeting, and then break into executive session again for 3 items to discuss potential litigation as it pertains to health agent, to consider the purchase, exchange, or value of real property as it pertains to the Peace Abbey land swap, and union contract negotiations with Community Maintenance and Development, AFL-CIO, State Council 93, Local 335.
Okay, do we have anything to add to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Oh, you have something to add, Paul?
Yeah, I thought the fundamental purpose of tonight's meeting was to actually issue a warrant, and I see all we have down here is considering support of various articles and any other warrant changes. Didn't we agree that we'd actually...
I think we've got, there's no other changes, the warrant's final, right? I mean, that's the...
Right, I think the intent would be to finalize the warrant and sign
And
it,
sign it.
if there are no more changes.
Well, and if we have changes, you can make them
Right now.
while we're doing this,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Okay, if that's what that agenda item means, then I don't...
That's what it
change
means, yep.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Carol, you're up for public comment.
Carol Marble, 8 Stony Brook Road. I'm also your town clerk. I found out accidentally this afternoon that the Board of Selectmen had voted to remove my warrant article regarding the signing of town meeting warrants. And I have to say I was shocked. No one even had the courtesy to let me know, and I think that's appalling. Now, in fairness to David Williams, our town administrator, I did bump into him in the hallway about 15 minutes ago, and he let me know. But this is very sad. It troubles me that the board does these things without informing people, especially when it's a town official. So, but this is your statutory right. You guys control the agenda, the warrant articles for town meeting, and I appreciate that. But this will have 2 consequences. One is the obvious one. Citizens will not have the opportunity to comment on or vote on a bylaw change requiring the Board of Selectmen to sign the town meeting warrant approximately 2 weeks before the advisory public hearing. Now, that's a reasonable amount of time, and that amount of time allows both the advisory committee and citizens to be well prepared for the public hearing and ask thoughtful questions so that all the articles are thoroughly vetted at the public hearing. That's the first consequence. And the second consequence is that going forward, as town clerk, all articles that come out of my office will henceforth be presented as citizen petitions. And that's a very sad comment on our town government.
Thank you. Thanks for the comments. Anybody have anything to add?
I think when we took the vote, we said, subject to consultation with the town clerk, because she wasn't here. So it
Well,
wasn't that...
the town clerk was here. She was in the room when we discussed the other warrant article. she was in the building knowing we had a hearing on all the warrant articles. So the town clerk was here. We had heard from the town clerk the first time we discussed it. We also had advice of town council. I mean, I think we went through a process. It was a very public process.
I think, I'd just say one other point. I think the idea of our signing the warrant 14 days in advance of the hearing is a good one. It's in the sense that we do need to finalize the warrant, and we do need to give it to advisory. If I recall, part of the problem was that the advisory hearing date was one that could be changed on 48 hours' notice, so there wasn't a clear date. And then I think another problem was, what happens if the deadline is missed by a day or whatever? Does that mean the whole town meeting is void, and then we have to cancel the town meeting and start all over again? So there was a lot of unanswered questions about it, and we had to come to a conclusion and do something. So we took the road of finalizing a warrant in a timely way and leaving out articles that looked like they needed more consideration and more work.
Well, if you saw the version that came from town council, she addressed your concern, Mr. Durensis, and it was her suggestion, and your town administrator was CC'd on that email, that because the advisory public hearing has no set deadline, it would be better, rather than to say the warrant needs to be signed X number of days before the public hearing, to that it is more legal to say that it be signed X number of days before the town meeting. And so you should have had that revision before you, last week at least.
But that wasn't from you. That was town council basically telling me what you submitted didn't work. Here was a possible consideration.
The last email she sent me was that with my consent, which she had via email, she would make that change to the article, and I signed off on that.
So
Okay,
I think the point's well taken, particularly the communication or lack thereof. You hate surprises, but I will say we're breaking practice of
Yeah.
discussing
I think it's unusual.
public comments, and it's on our, and it's already on our agenda here to talk about the warrant, so we could talk further about it
Okay,
later
that's
if
fine.
we think it's warranted.
Liquor license actions, one-day liquor license. David, you want to present this?
Sure.
Or Jeannie, or whoever's going to
This
present?
is for the Friends of Sherborn Library. They're having their annual trivia night fundraiser at the Sherborn Community Center. They've asked for a one-day liquor license for at-your-service bartending, which is the bartending service. And the Friends are also asking if the Board of Selectmen can waive the $50 fee, since this is a community event fundraiser. The documents are included, and the motion should include approval of it plus the waiver of the fee.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Great. I think we're now going into executive session, is that right?
You could, you could go into executive session a little early and talk about one of the other items, or, while we wait for...
One of the other executive session items, I think we probably should keep to that schedule. So why don't we just start the budget review discussion, if that's, or start the warrant discussion, one or the other. We've got 15 minutes.
Yeah, we could start the warrant. I told the town accountant to come in at 7, but I don't think we have anything.
15 minutes was a lot of time to sign a one-day liquor license.
Right.
Not if you
If you go to the most recent warrant,
Yeah.
I think we have solidified what changes need to be made on it. I don't know if you want to read through the warrant one by one, or how you want to go through that.
I do have some questions, okay? read what you sent this afternoon, but I didn't, and I see what Jeannie's done, which is change the order. So, can I just
Yes,
ask a
please, yeah,
question? One, we removed the prior Article 4, which related to collective bargaining. That's no longer in here.
Oh, yes.
Is
The,
that-
yeah, I checked with council about that, and what we'll be discussing in executive session shows that it's funded with available
With the,
funds,
appropriation, okay.
that there's not an existing appropriation needed in the current year or next year other than what's currently in their
Okay.
budget.
Okay. Can I keep going with some
Keep
changes?
going,
We had
please.
changes that we discussed last week on the item number 8 of Article, still 7, where we described it as Town Hall parking and access study.
That's exactly right.
So we should make that
Yeah.
change. And I don't know, on the traffic safety Article 2, we have engineering and construction. We already did the engineering, correct? Or is there further engineering, and we like that wording?
On which item?
2, the schooling and, West Schooling and Woodland.
I'm going
I
to
don't
ask
have a problem.
Mr.
I'd love to
Clean.
make a comment on
Yeah,
that.
if you could, because you've been closest to it.
Since we last met, you might know we've been discussing the possibility of the article for the,
You want to come up and start on camera and the microphone, please? Did you want to motion?
No, get up.
We won't violate any FCC restrictions on election candidates getting airtime, I don't think. You're okay.
thanks for that. Sean Colleen, I'm representing traffic safety, I guess. We have discussed since the last meeting the possible, the possibility of needing an article for the easement for the property which is currently under the roadway at that intersection. So there, no doubt will be some engineering, even if we were to say the plan is done, there's gonna be some more surveying that has to be done to certify everything such that that
That makes
could
sense.
take place for the easement.
Gotcha.
And I actually wanted to move that item 2 from there to Article 11 and combine the two. We have an article to acquire real estate to do the project, and we have the funding to do the project in a different article. Because they're so related, rather than have two separate discussions at town meeting on the same intersection, I thought we should combine the two into one article.
We're seeing Article 11 for the first time. So don't we have an easement issue whether or not this project goes forward? So wouldn't we want Article 11? And I think as it's worded, it covers it related or unrelated to the project, because it talks about whatever work the town may do to that particular parcel of land.
Well, if we're gonna take it by eminent domain, I mean, there's a complicated legal script here that I could,
I'm just
Talk
trying not to
about
leave it hanging on,
we probably own it by adverse possession after all these years,
yeah,
because we've been there a long
Yeah.
time. So I'm not sure that we'd actually wanna take it by eminent domain if we're not doing the project. And what I understood from the property owner was that basically if we move most of the encroachment off his property, he would give us a deed to the new location.
That's right.
He was
Okay.
gonna get
All right.
property returned to him. So I'm
We're not sure he can do that.
No, he won't have enough acreage.
We don't think he's got the square footage to do that.
On his
To
house.
give the
on
land.
his house lot.
Yes.
What's that?
So he'd have to give an easement, is that what you're saying?
I think he's gonna have to give an easement to
just
keep
an
his
easement.
property.
Yeah. Which is what this article.
Again, none of that's been certified either, right? I mean,
No, sir, there's been no surveys.
right, and even the survey that's been done was strictly those property lines.
Okay,
So if I get what,
To further determine that, you'd have to certify his survey
right,
to prove if he even had the square footage to give.
right, sure.
so if I get what you're saying, Paul, by marrying the engineering and construction portion of the article with Article 11 here, covers all we need to cover related to this person's property and our encroachment on it.
Yes, but I'm also trying to say, the flow of town meeting is better if we discuss
Oh, I agree with that, yeah.
that intersection at one time, rather than have discussion and then an hour and a half later we bring it up again and start talking about it all over again.
It's a good thought on that. So what would we do, Paul? You're suggesting we move item 2 under Article 7 and convert it into a sentence that goes at the
Yeah.
front of Article 11?
Right.
I have a
Okay.
proposed one.
Yeah.
Would say to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate funds for the engineering and reconstruction of the Woodland and West Goulding Street intersection in the amount of $95,000, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire by gift, and then the rest of the article.
Great. I'm
Does
fine
that-
with that.
Yeah.
Yes, Susan first, you got something to say?
Yeah, well, I have a question. If you combine the two together, what happens if, because people do not want to spend the $95,000, you combine the two of these together, what happens as far as the recording and the surveying of the property and the potential?
Well, we wouldn't be doing the project then, at that point, so
But
it goes away.
don't we still need to, now that this has been identified, that we have property, town property, or use of it through somebody's land that has not been recorded? Should that not still be straightened out?
And Paul's comment earlier addressed that. He talked about how by adverse possession, after all these years, the town very well probably owns that property and doesn't need to take it, which would involve paying money and having a legal proceeding,
And if
potentially.
we take it, then that property may not be a conforming lot, so there's cost to be had for that as far as surveying, I would assume, to verify all that.
Well, I think what we're saying is we wouldn't need to take it. We would just let things rest. If that intersection change doesn't pass, then we just let it sit.
And you couldn't take out number 2 and bring it down to number 7 in the capital budget there, and then change Article 8 for Article 11, so they're still within sync as far as your discussion on the town floor. But it still keeps them separate, but they're tied together very closely, make number 9 versus 2, and Article 8, switch that for 11. So there's,
I'm not
I see
following
what you're
your-
saying, but I'm comfortable with how Paul suggested doing it.
And so, Jeannie, you're capturing all these changes, and we'll redo one of these, because who's capturing these? Because we're dealing with things that didn't get captured last week, so I just want
I
Sure,
can change
somebody
it while
is.
you're in executive session,
Okay.
if you give me the word.
all right, so I had a little ditzy thing. Article 8, the end of school committee has closed parens.
Chairman,
Um,
In terms of the order.
Oh, yes, wait, we had, Mr. Taylor had a comment also.
on Golden Street West and Woodland Street, I'll say it again for the fifth and
Oh, we're not talking about,
500th time.
something, this is strictly what's in the article of the warrant, Elliot. We're talking about the language of the warrant now, not the policy of it. This is just-
I'll say it again, make it a three-way stop.
Okay, you
and
don't have to
then-
say it again. Thank you. Let's go on.
And then dismiss this article.
Peter, what else did you have?
Take
Last
no
week,
action.
we had talked of having Article, what is now Article 10, I think, still, was to be between Article 8 and 9. It doesn't matter to me, but I just point that out. We had some logic last week.
What is
that
now
made
8 and
sense.
9? That's right, it went between.
It was going between
Yes.
those two.
Yeah.
But I had asked the town administrator to talk to the town moderator to see how she wanted the town meeting to run smoothly in terms of order. So it may well be that some of the initial thoughts we had about order
That's fine,
were affected by his discussion with
No.
the town moderator.
no real skin in that game.
Yeah, I don't remember why I told Jeannie to move it.
Do you remember, Jeannie? Why? Well, I think you did move it. I think what happened was.
Well, it did get moved
Oh,
from
do
the
I
back
move the back to the top?
to
No, I know
not,
why, because last week that was 10 and 11.
So do you want it switched?
Right, the numbers are different. It's
Do
just.
you want number 9
well,
to go in
we had it between,
Do you want 10 to go in between 8 and 9, so 10 is now the library?
Oh, yeah.
That's
that
what we
did-
said the last
yeah,
time.
we wanted it
the-
before
the-
library, right?
Yeah, we wanted to be for the library.
So you want library to be 10, and the assessor's article to be 9?
Yeah, I did
Okay.
specifically move
I
it
can
out,
do that.
Yeah,
thinking that it
Yeah,
didn't fit.
okay.
Yeah, okay. So we just got that backwards.
Just move it back.
Good. Now I'm just trying to catch up with the gyrations we did here. You lost me now. Rescind. Yeah, Article 14 in this, isn't that supposed to still, in the latest draft we have in front of us?
What about?
Weren't we moving that to the end of Article, what is now Article 15?
I think that
That
was
was a
another,
contingency, wasn't it? No? I mean,
I think there was some reordering.
yeah,
today.
we had wording last week on that particular article which said, in the event Article now 15 fails at town meeting, to see if the town would vote to amend general bylaws of Chapter 3 by adopting. I think those are my notes, or accepting.
43C.
Yeah. So I'm confused on what we got going there,
Yeah,
and where, why it's there, where versus
Yeah,
after.
there's two issues here. One is that 14 was supposed to follow 15.
Yes, that's one
That's the
point.
first point. The second point was that what that article was supposed to be was to make
Contingency.
reference to the acceptance of a statute.
That's right.
Right.
And this isn't talking, but this is saying, let's adopt another bylaw different
All right,
from,
So let's use the language we used the last time, which was, it was to see if the town will vote to accept Chapter 43C, right?
Yeah, but I think we prefaced it with, in the event that Article
yeah, only if,
15 fails
right.
at town meeting. Or
Which is now
however
gonna be
you would
14,
word
which is now
that.
gonna be
Which would now
14.
be 14, right?
Let me,
Then we would accept or adopt. I forget what the words were. You guys are
I
the
had
lawyers in there.
accept
Yeah,
here.
good wording, yeah. Good wording last week. That's all right.
Do we need to say anything beyond vote to accept Chapter 43C, Paul? No?
can we, we'll give this to Paul to read during the break. This is from Barbara.
On what we should say with that article?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's gotta go after the government task force article. And it's gotta start with, to see if, in the event that Article 14 fails.
Right, it's only a
Okay.
contingency,
Yes.
which we hope we won't have to get to.
And I'm confused on Article 16.
So are you okay with the government task force
Yes.
article, the way it's been
For the
revised?
finance director account, looks like it pulled all of the comments that we last saw from the governance task force, which reflected our comments
Okay,
last
so
week.
you checked that.
So I think that looks pretty good, and it's in the version I saw this afternoon, and I presume it's still in this latest one we got
Okay,
tonight.
all right.
Okay. So then my question was,
So now we're on 16, Peter?
16, yes. Didn't we decide that we weren't keeping that in?
I'm gonna look right now.
I think we said we'd keep it in, but do it by ballot and not by article. But so I gather if it's still in, the town council said it had to be in.
To do the
Yeah,
ballot piece?
and she said that it's referring to see if the town will vote to make the office of treasurer an appointed office to be filled by appointment of the Board of Selectmen in accordance with General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 1B, upon acceptance by the voters at the annual town election.
So what she's saying is it has to be voted on at
Yeah.
town meeting in order to get to the ballot? We can't just place it on the ballot. I think what we
That
talked
was
about
what
last
I
time
thought
was
was
placing it
last
on the
week.
ballot.
Right, and not having an article.
Right, right. Yeah, I'll have to look. Yeah, that's what
That's what, is what
I
she said,
understood, yeah.
which is not what we'd heard earlier in the year. Do you have any feelings on this one, Paul?
Yeah, the whole point was to go with the ballot question under 41.
Right. And Barbara's saying it has to be on the warrant in order to get to the ballot? Have you provided us with that town council opinion, did you?
I'm not sure. I have to
What?
I have to find which one is being referred to.
Well, unless town council was requiring us to have this article, I would not put this article on.
Which is what we thought last week.
Last time.
Yeah.
So let's leave it at that. If town council says it has to be on, then
But it means we're not going to be signing this tonight, right?
No, we'll have an answer.
All right, but this is a lot of stuff that we dealt with last time.
Right. Those are all I had.
17, we're right. Oh, that was, I'm sorry, that was up here. That's the collector.
Collector, yep.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
And the next one's your charter commission. The charter commission.
Yeah, why are we pushing for a charter commission? Let me
We
rephrase
actually
that.
crossed that out. We voted to not have that.
Did we? Yeah, I was a little
We
unclear,
did nothing.
so,
We voted
okay.
voted not to put that on the warrant.
I thought so. I thought this was going
That's
to
what I
be
kind of thought, but my notes didn't reflect that.
too disruptive for the community at this point to
Yeah,
do that.
okay.
Yeah. I'm glad we read this carefully.
Okay, we got the changes to the personnel.
Personnel bylaw changes went in.
Should we be saying that as I read it again? Where it
Why
says
does it
Board of
say Board?
Selectmen?
Well, hang on one second. Why does it say by inserting a new section 4D and then it starts with the letter B instead of D?
Mine has D.
It says
Mine has
D.
D. Okay, I'm looking at the old one. Good, the new one has D. Perfect. Let's see.
Well, we don't say Board of Selectmen for Personnel Committee on this one. I wonder if we should.
Yeah, we should.
Is
Yes,
that what you want?
yes,
Yeah.
for both 19 and 20.
Yeah.
Both of those were requested by the personnel board. I think it's called a board, not a committee.
Personnel Board.
So they were here, they made the case for it, and we agreed to put it on the warrant for them.
So the only other comment I have, which actually is for the Article 28, which is the citizens petition.
Can we just go through them in sequence? Let's just see if anybody
Absolutely,
has any comments on Article 21, which is the kennel one. I thought the reference was to 22F, at least that's what I wrote down.
Yes.
22J,
No, it's,
22F?
yes.
Good catch.
wrong index finger.
We could fix that in the motion now if we have.
Yeah, it's fine, well, we can fix it here.
Yeah, yes.
The next was the Town Forest Committee, right?
Recreation Commission.
Recreation.
I'm sorry, that's right, Recreation Commission. Okay, and then we were up to 28 here.
Okay, so,
No, you're the old 28, right?
23
We're on
is
23,
the
okay.
planning board.
23, no, I don't have a comment on that.
And so nothing changed on those?
No.
Board of Assessors.
24, 25, 26, 27, all look good to me.
But before you give your comment on 28, that's a citizen article, and so it has to go in the way it is.
Right, so I understand that, I just want to just be sure somebody double checks, because it has a reference to deletions and strike-through type. And I believe there are sections of the article that had strike-through terms
Didn't
that
get
didn't
picked
get
up here.
picked up here.
Good catch.
That's my question.
It's just the one, and, right? And. It's just the one.
And it's on here.
It says and.
Okay, I think if you looked at the actual zoning article for building occupancy, you'd see wording that is no longer there. And it has been replaced by what's in bold. That's my recollection. I could be wrong.
I have to put what is in the article.
Yes, that's all we're asking you, is to double check it.
I will.
Yeah, just to be sure their intent is met.
So it's the same as it was the last time?
Yeah, it's the same. I just, noticed it and struck me as odd. And I have one last question, all right? This is
Last
a
ones
hard
are all
question,
citizen articles.
okay? Which is not about an article, but actually, Article 11, or whatever we just added.
Yeah.
Do we have to open the warrant to do that?
I think our vote to,
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about the land taking one.
Yes.
the Woodland and Coogan Street intersection, I think our vote to put.
Put them together and cover those.
There's already an existing
Yes.
item here. And all we're doing is expanding the language to be not just an appropriation, but an appropriation essentially any necessary land takings that go with the appropriation.
Okay,
Okay, good.
all right, so do we have all the changes?
Could I weigh in on, back to the treasurer thing? From council, she had sent me, to make the treasurer an appointed position, the town meeting must vote in favor of placing the question on the ballot. GL Chapter 41, Section 1.
Okay, so it has to stay.
The board has to come out. You want it on the ballot?
Yeah.
I thought you didn't want it at town meeting.
Well, we're gonna do the ballot long before town meeting. We have to do the ballot.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, I thought you did not want, if this was something that was gonna go to a town meeting vote, you thought we should drop it. That's how I understood what you said before. Do you think we should leave it on the town meeting warrant in order to get it to the ballot?
Yes, yeah, might as well.
Did you feel like
Well, it still is best practice, I think. It is what's recommended. So in spite of its lack of support in the last couple of go-rounds, it's, keep trying.
75% of the communities in the state have done this reform back in the 1980s, so we're 30, 40 years behind.
Yeah, we're still in the 20th century.
it was from the time? Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. So that's, where's that going?
That was Article 16.
So it's staying in this article 16. The
Yeah.
18's coming out, and we've got to renumber everything after 18.
And you said that the Consolidated Department of Municipal Finance is moving its location, right? From, okay.
Behind the
And as a
plans
contingency.
Okay.
Our position is sport governance.
Let me,
But if things get screwed up with changes and more edits, it's been such a moving target. But they keep coming in with more and more changes.
On which one?
Just, I'm talking about the finance director.
So moving, you're talking about the one that's moving beyond.
Yeah, the contingent one,
Okay, gotcha. The
um,
Consolidated Department.
yes.
this is, that's.
So it's good that the governance task force reflected the comments that we provided them in what's in here at this stage.
So can I make a motion to adopt the article as amended? And to have it ready for,
The warrant is
Warrant
finished.
Um,
All right,
I
so
don't think you want
the current Article 14 is going to go after the finance it's gonna go after the finance accountant, that one?
But it's going to change. It's not the current article. It's
Right, but it is gonna change, but it's gonna drop down
yes,
after the
Yes.
finance director
Yes.
article.
Yes.
I need someone to give an opinion on the opinion on the Consolidated Finance Department,
In charge of your usual fee to
oh, I think I can do that, oh, I can't.
the first paragraph.
Yeah, you're aware?
That looks like a selectman vote to adopt it.
Okay, so what you're saying is we don't need this contingent one? We can just do it by selectmen vote?
That's what appears to be the case.
Does that say the selectmen can vote to adopt it and then it gets placed on the ballot?
No, it says we can't adopt the statute. We can
Vote to put it on the
adopt
ballot.
the warrant for the election. We can put it on the election warrant And if the voters vote for it, then later we can adopt a bylaw that we define the office.
So that's not a town, that's not an article right now?
Well, so can we do this by town meeting vote?
Not according to that, that was the most recent,
We're talking about Article 16, yes?
14.
Not 14?
No,
Diane, could you go downstairs and get me chapter 43? See. Sorry to bother you.
What's the site chapter?
Okay.
This one, Paul?
Yeah, there we go. Mr. Google Books over
You
here.
know, he always, never ceases to amaze me. He's got
Yes.
so much stuff he brings in.
Well, that's why
And we make fun
that's
of
why I
him,
keep
but
fit.
he's got so much stuff stored away.
He's Google.
What was-
Little Town office.
what was the date on that opinion? What was the date?
What was the date on what?
On that opinion that we just read?
This looks like it does take a town meeting.
So, David, what we're saying is this.
Hang on a second, what about section 7?
It's only, I only have,
Oh,
I
sorry.
read the whole thing,
I
Paul?
don't have the whole thing.
Section 7 says the city council or board of selectmen may submit to the voters of the city or town a proposal for the acceptance of any of the optional plans of municipal administration which are provided in this chapter in the same manner and with the same force and effect as is hereby provided for submission by petition.
That's what she's saying. You can vote to place it on the ballot. The selectmen can vote to place it on the ballot instead, or it can be on the ballot by petition, but not the
But
town
not
meeting.
by town meeting, okay.
So we're in error to have it at town meeting the way we have it, is the point you're making?
We should just have it as an agenda item at some point to place it on the ballot.
It's incorrect to have it as a town meeting
Why would
warrant
we put it on the
article.
ballot if the government task force item passes?
We would, but we won't know that. We have to
Because
sign
we
the
wouldn't have
ballot.
time to put it on
That's
the
what I mean.
ballot.
2 weeks before town meeting.
So if the town meeting passes the government task force and this is still on the ballot, we could really have a messed up situation.
Isn't it nullified if it's, if the finance director passes?
Right, if the statute passes, it would nullify your item,
But
which is not what we wanted to do.
Right. We want to go with your item. This is only a fallback in case your item,
well, let's be positive, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what for us before.
we're into just sort of a procedural.
Yeah, I
point.
understand
That's
that,
what's
and I'm
going on.
sorry,
It's not-
I
it's
didn't
not-
think this was going to be discussed until after 7.
We didn't either.
Okay, and we have a meeting about to start downstairs.
Okay. We're not making any changes of substance, we're really just talking about how to get the alternative language
Right.
onto the ballot if we need to.
well, I would say, given the fact that we need to get a warrant out, let's leave it on. We can always withdraw or recommend no action on something, but if it's not there, then we're stuck.
So we're putting on something that town council has advised is not something that we can do anything about?
Well, I'm worried that you have to do the ballot before you know the outcome of town meeting. We do this every year. So we put Prop 2.5 ballot questions on without knowing whether or not the voters are going to adopt it at town meeting or not. So to some extent, then we put questions on, and if it doesn't get adopted at town meeting, we essentially tell people, and everybody knows it hasn't been done.
So do we think, the way we have worded this Article 14, in the event it, the prior one fails, that's enough to nullify the ballot? Or do we have to add additional wording to nullify the ballot in this article? Just to be certain we're clear, follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, it's important. If the finance director accountant article doesn't get legs, doesn't pass, and we are dealing with, then it seems to me that rather than having something on the ballot, unless Barbara's saying it's absolutely incorrect to have an article related to this on the warrant, and I'm not clear in that case, then we want this contingency, and in this contingency, I guess we would withdraw it, and I'm just looking for what nullifies the ballot very clearly to the voters, because this is something that I think is important for them to weigh in on.
Barbara's coming in for
7 o'clock.
second
Okay,
executive
so we
session.
Get some sense there.
Oh, is she coming in for the warrant discussion?
No.
It's really hard to read this here, when I'm trying to listen to the conversation and make sense of this. So, this is something
Within
that,
30 days of the receipt of the petition, the council or board of selectmen shall by order provide for submission of the questions specified petitions to the voters of the city or town at the first regular city election or at the first annual or biennial town meeting for the election of town officers. So that would have to be a spring election, right? That would have to be a spring election. So really we'd be a year off if we did anything to this.
if we did it by petition.
We
If
can't
we
do
did it by ballot as well, we'd be a year off?
If
No,
we-
I think we could put it on the town meeting ballot, right?
We can put it on this year's annual town meeting ballot.
The problem is,
Or next
if we
year's.
do that and it passes and town meeting has already passed the government studies task force's article, we're in a quandary.
When you guys are saying town meeting ballot, you're not talking about town meeting warrants, because we don't do a ballot.
That's what
It's the ballot.
I'm reading in
It's the
her
ballot
opinion.
when they
There's,
elect- It's a referendum question.
there's a reference to town, should the town vote this, should the town vote that?
Yeah.
She's saying, she's referring to the ballot.
The town
Not
meeting.
Ballot,
town
not
meeting.
town meeting.
That's right, that's the
Right.
problem.
But in any event, I think whether it goes to town meeting or not, you need a ballot question. Town meeting alone, I don't think can adopt all this stuff. This is by memory
Yeah.
and not by reading. So it has to go to the ballot anyway.
Well, the quandary is the nullification is really the key,
So-
right?
Yes, so here's a question. Why don't we ask town meeting as an alternative to direct the selectmen to put it on the subsequent annual election ballot?
Because that's a year off.
Doesn't matter. Why would that matter?
Because I'd
It's still a
rather
year,
have-
I understand it's still a year away.
Yeah,
But
but
we
we'd rather
don't-
have it on the ballot and then tell people not to vote for it than to have everything pass and then have to go a whole year off. That's an awful.
So just practically speaking, if the finance director, town accountant article as drafted by the governance task force passes,
Then Paul's gonna stand up.
Then
in
we're
front
just
of
gonna
town
say,
hall with
we
a sign that
withdraw
says,
this.
Vote no on whatever.
yes, and we withdraw the article. But if their article does
You can't
not
withdraw the
pass,
article. It's not gonna be an article, right? You can't withdraw the article. It's gotta be on the town ballot. That's what he's saying.
yeah, it will still be on the town ballot, but we'd still also be withdrawing the article.
If we have an article, we withdraw the article.
Okay.
But what Barbara is saying is the article is no use, right?
I haven't, yeah, I'll ask her. I haven't had a chance to read all this. My sense was that you had to have a town meeting vote to adopt an ordinance. The statute authorizes the town to adopt a bylaw. And so that's the legal underpinning for the bylaw, but the article doesn't contain a bylaw. So we'd have to
It's
go back.
30 a
to
year
town-
away.
We'd have, if the question passed, then we'd go to town meeting with a proposed bylaw. Right, but we could hold a special town meeting if necessary with some language that would implement the vote of the town.
And that would save us a few months in terms of your concern about waiting a year. All right, well, let's get to our executive session because everybody's late.
Well, let's just finalize the warrant. I would,
We're going to talk to town council, but we can't finalize the warrant. We're going to talk to town council about that issue. We need to talk to town council and then finalize the warrant.
but she's coming in after we're recessing, apparently. That's the last item on the agenda.
She's coming in for the
Well,
executive.
we'll ask her to get here earlier and we'll deal with it that way. We're already running late by almost a half an hour, so.
Okay.
um,
I vote aye.
Okay, I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session to discuss potential litigation as it pertains to Mercurio versus Town of Sherborn pursuant to Chapter 38, Section 21A37, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM, and discussing this in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position. The board will return to public session at approximately 7:15. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Having a second, we will now have a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
Aye.
Mr. Caruso.
Aye.
And Mr. Jarmo's aye. Okay, having passed by a vote of 3-0, we are now out of it. Open session is now closed, and we will be returning to public session at approximately 7:15. We are now in executive session. Okay, great, thanks, we're back on the air, I guess, and we've returned from executive session, and we are in the process of budget review, I guess, is our next item. We're gonna go back to the warrant once it's been cleaned up by the folks down in our office, and, but for now, we'll look at the budget review. So we have a police take-home vehicle, is that the first one you wanna talk about, Dave?
Yes, the first one, we included the budget with the take-home vehicle program, and we had some discussions with the chief this week and some other capital budget committee advisory, everyone, and the chief wanted to present some additional information.
Yeah, as the board's aware, I sent all of you an email, and after careful consideration and discussion with people from Capital Budget Advisory, we felt pretty strongly that there's a need to do a lot more in-depth analysis into this idea. So, out of respect to the community, this is certainly a lot of money that we'd be asking the taxpayer. I don't want to go forward at town meeting with a product that's not ready for preview, let's say. So I'm going to pull the warrant this year. We're going to work on the analysis over the next year and hopefully present next year.
Thanks, and hopefully it doesn't discourage you from innovations in the future, because this was, it's great that you're thinking all the time, trying to improve the department and improve the fiscal situation in town, and thanks for doing that, and, maybe this will work out another year.
Absolutely, and I do have to say, on camera, that I truly appreciated the communication I had with Bob Searle from Capital, and frankly, he was very supportive, and he offered to help with this analysis moving forward, so.
That's great.
To say that.
Good.
Thanks.
So Jeannie's gonna take that off of the warrant, right?
I'm just sending Diane down to tell her to pull it.
Okay, what's the next item, David? The building inspector budget?
We have the treasurer only and accountant budgets revised. We also have the inspection budget and the town budget model. You want to go to treasurer or inspections?
Well, let's talk about inspections if we've got that.
Okay, inspections, the building commissioner couldn't be here tonight due to a class. There's a memo included in your packet from him that was distributed to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Health and to the advisory chair. I won't read the whole memo, but basically his assessment of a consolidated inspections department where the building commissioner was doing food inspections and sanitarian inspections for the Board of Health, had an estimated savings of about $25,000, which is a little up from what he'd originally estimated.
And how do you agree with that? Does that add up to you?
Yeah, it does. He did some adjustments on the hourly rate that would be paid under the commissioner's budget, and yeah, the adjustments made sense to me.
So as town administrator, you recommend this? I think that's really what Michael was asking.
Yeah.
Well, I had asked the building commissioner to look into it and come back with, if it was possible. It's possible, it generates savings. Yes, I've been supporting it for a while now, and we had some opposition expressed in the advisory committee meeting, so it's a very unpopular, or potentially unpopular position, but
I don't
if you're
think,
looking for savings, it's,
I'm not sure that's a
Great
fair
savings.
characterization of what happened at advisory. I think what advisory was saying is work this out with the Board of Health rather than force them to
right,
be a referee between two boards.
right.
And I hope that that advice is taken to heart. And
Well, as I mentioned in the advisory meeting, I had mentioned it to the chair of the Board of Health months ago, the concept of it, and it wasn't picked up at that point, and that's when we started looking at it a little more. And then most recently, the Board of Health is looking to, they're going to have a more of a conversation on this and explore other options. That could be having a Board of Health director, or reorganizing the office and the director being the agent, or it could be this, it could be putting another contract out. But the chair has told me that they are going to continue a conversation about it, but that doesn't mean that something's going to be resolved before town meeting.
but for that meeting, could we have Felix and you actually attend the meeting? I'm mindful of the fact that it's a three-person board, not just the chairman of the board. And if they actually have a chance to see and ask questions and be engaged, they may feel better than simply getting emails and.
No, I offered to attend. They were meeting the same night we were, so I offered the building commissioner to go and explain the memo, and that was not picked up on. That was not welcome. So the building commissioner didn't go.
So they have this memo, but they didn't care to hear from the building inspector.
Not like that.
What makes this an unusual opportunity for the town is that you normally don't have an existing town official who has the ability to be a sanitarian, because he did this work in another town. It's just a nice opportunity to save $25,000. And if it can be done in a way that doesn't have any effect on the Board of Health's powers, I think that's what their concern was. So it can be done in a way that doesn't affect their powers. And I don't think you're proposing any changes to their powers. There's no bylaw changes, there's no governance changes, there's no home rule petition, there's nothing there to take any effect on their powers. So this is an opportunity to take advantage of a fairly unique opportunity that directly saves money for the community.
Mm-hmm. Right. I just don't think that if advisory is looking for support from our board and their board in time for their hearing, I don't think that we're going to have both boards in support of this by that time.
It's still good to air it in public. I think we should keep it on our budget and have the conversation. And if it's not something that Board of Health is willing to go for, let them be the one to kill an idea that saves the town $25,000.
So the budgets we're showing right now in the model are reflecting this change?
No.
No. They aren't
So we
reflecting
would have
this
to
change.
put that change in.
We would have to put that change through, sell that change, because we as a board, as I recall, we are very supportive of moving in this direction to the extent it could be sold, I don't know if that's the right word, to the Board of Health, to get them to to buy into this approach. And absent that, where does that leave us? It leaves us, sounds like status quo in the budget model, and the need to have discussions at advisory public hearing to say, here's an opportunity to save $25,000. We're not taking advantage of that opportunity. We're not trying to step on toes. We just think it's a unique situation here, and why not try to take advantage of it?
So it would, I mean, the reason we didn't put it in our budget is because in the big picture, it would require a reduction
In their
in other
budget.
budget.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So we thought that advisory was the place where that transfer
So
would
we haven't
be adjusted.
touched their budget as submitted, right? I think that's right.
So we make no change now, we bring it up at advisory and at town meeting and every place else?
I don't know, I guess so, right? Because we're not gonna gain traction. We haven't gained traction with this approach.
Right, I think it would be confusing to submit the budget laying a claim on the same money in both budgets. So, right.
Well, I do want to have the record clear by the time of the advisory's hearing on the 21st, that every effort was made to involve the Board of Health with great respect and deference to their function as elected officials, but to engage them on the business of saving the taxpayers $25,000. So it wouldn't be a question then of why haven't you talked to the Board of Health? The question would be, we can't get agreement here with the Board of Health, and therefore it's really up to advisory as to whether or not they want us to save the money or spend the money.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to, I mean, I have an assurance from the Board of Health that they're going to continue discussions and look at their operations and organizational setup. And this is something that could be done with a mid-year transfer if, for some reason, the budget process is missed. It shouldn't be, if they don't do their work in analyzing it by the time town meeting comes around, that it should be put on a shelf, that it can continue and it could be adjusted at any time.
It's just, I don't want a confrontation with another board. I just want everybody on the same page and let's save money because we're all taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer, they're taxpayers.
Right, I'm saying
We're all
that
taxpayers.
the amount of time that we have to work with, they're not going to be at the same place we are in a number of weeks.
But
It's going to take longer.
why is this before us tonight? We're not,
Because it was an open item, it was still an item that we did not finally resolve. We said we wanted to bring it back after advisory, so. I
I'm
think-
still where I am
Yes, I
before,
think what
which
we're
is
saying
it's
is
worth trying.
It's worth trying, but we're not gonna change our budget model to start that process. We're gonna speak up at various meetings, but not change the budget. Is that right, Peter?
Right. Yeah, I don't think we can change the budget.
All right, so why don't you, I'd like to do, why don't you vote the inspections budget? I don't think that that's,
All right, what was the number on that? Do we need a number or just vote it as proposed?
as appeared in the selectmen's model.
Right, but that's without,
Right,
no, I'm not gonna vote for that budget.
Right. I
I'm
see
gonna
what you're
vote
saying.
against the budget,
Right.
because the budget I want is the one that saves us $25,000.
An accepted budget as it is, was submitted with the addition of the alternative savings generated by the Consolidated Inspections Department.
That's the one I wanna vote for. I don't wanna vote for any, if advisory says no to that, that's fine.
Right.
But I think, from my view as representing taxpayers in this town, I don't want them to pay, I don't want any taxpayer to pay any money that they don't need to pay. So I don't want to vote for a budget that's going to have me imposing on the voters more.
Do you want to make a motion and, as I just said, to approve that with the,
Mr. Lifferton here from the Board of Health, the dignitary, who may have something to say on this.
Yeah, I just happened to come into the meeting, I actually was here for the planning board hearing, but came in to hear you discussing our budget.
We're not discussing your budget, we're discussing the
You
building.
discuss, I understand, you're discussing an alternative budget. And obviously, the Board of Health was before you, I guess, 2 weeks ago on this same subject. I would only say that the $25,000 that Mr. Drensis alludes to is unvetted. It's not proven, and in fact, I don't believe it would ever come to fruition in that manner. We had an extensive discussion with, a week after meeting with you, extensive discussion on our budget with the advisory committee. And you'll have to forgive me because I didn't expect to speak tonight, but the discussion with the advisory committee pretty much went to the point that statutorily, and I'm sure Mr. Drensis knows this, that the Board of Health agent, the agent working for the Board of Health, is the exclusive decision of the Board of Health, and none other. And so whether or not these funds are moved around and taken from the Board of Health budget and put into an inspectional services department, whoever is doing that Board of Health work is still the exclusive decision of the Board of Health, and the funding for that, would have to support whatever is decided. I will tell you that that the advisory committee hearing, the board did commit to a thorough investigation of the organization of the board, how it's accomplished. We did recognize that, an employee as opposed to a contract may be in fact a more cost-effective approach and offer greater public contact. We are certainly open to that. We committed to looking into all of that in the near future, but we'll also recognize that March 21st, when they have to make a decision, is way too soon to have been able to study and vet and analyze all of those opportunities. And so we did request of them our originally submitted budget, and I would say the same thing to you, that I think the coming year is ripe for that discussion. I think it's ripe for that that alternative study, and that we should be doing it. I don't think that doing it in such a rapid fashion and in such a precipitous fashion is in the best interest of anybody, because frankly, nobody's prepared for that. We would, we don't have a way to, well, we haven't found don't have a candidate for the Board of Health inspections and so forth, and haven't had a chance to look into that, in that manner of organization. It may in fact be one of the viable alternatives, but I think it's something that's serious enough that deserves more study than just a recommendation from, or a suggestion from your board 2 weeks ago, a conversation with advisory last week, and they have to take a committed vote on March 21st. I would just recommend that this is something that should be put off and take the time to study and do it as a cooperative effort, in fact, between advisory, selectmen, Board of Health, and all included. Thank you.
Just, can I ask Peter a question?
Yes.
There was a memo dated March 4, 2015, that went to the Board of Health, yes. And we just had a report that the potential existing town employee who could do the sanitary inspections, all that kind of stuff, septic system inspections, wanted an offer to meet with your board, and he was told not to come?
It was not invited. We offered, but
Could I suggest that
I'm sorry,
you...
but that never came to me.
Could I suggest that you actually interview the guy and meet with the guy and look at his memo and his proposal at one of your meetings?
That could be scheduled. It's, our agenda would be the first meeting in April. Our agenda for the 18th is so packed that we will be there again until midnight. But it goes more to the point that I'm making, that we can certainly meet with the gentleman, but it's not something that can be configured in the next 2 weeks, or actually by the 21st of March. All right? I wish this idea had been vetted, 4 months ago.
It's just that, you know, as a taxpayer, one of the largest taxpayers in town, I don't want to spend 25,000 if I don't have to. I understand if we
Paul, I
need
really
to.
don't believe the 25,000. I really don't think that's a number that's been vetted, that's been confirmed, and you know, it used to be 12,000, and suddenly it went to 20, and now I'm hearing 25. That the number grows by the day, and to just keep repeating that number without substantiating it, I think is a mistake.
Well, David just said he had substantiated the numbers. He had gone through it and analyzed it.
have.
He analyzed it based on
My knowledge.
an agent that, you know, had not been vetted by the board, has not, you know, hasn't been researched or anything else.
Oh, so the issue really is more the staff person who's currently in that position rather than the concept of combining? Are you're
Oh, not at all.
You're open to concept?
Again, one concept is your proposal for an inspectional services department. Another concept is a part-time, less than 20-hour Board of Health agent as an employee of the town. Another concept that has been even suggested by the town administrator is that a health agent at the head of the department with an administrative assistant and so forth. There are a variety of ways this can be looked at.
Have you thought about combining with another town, a single position shared with another town?
We hadn't, but the fact is that is, you know, certainly a viable way of looking at it, and certainly for agent services that would, you know, could make sense. So, but again, I say, you know, I think the board has more than amply demonstrated a willingness to go in any of these directions when they're fully studied, vetted, and evaluated, given the responsibilities that we have. I just don't see it happening in the next, what's today, the 12th? 12 and 9 is 21, 9 days?
No, and I get that, Peter, and I'm glad to hear what I think you're saying, which is that everything's on the table at this point for your board, and I also...
The board has said to advisory, everything's on the table.
Good. Well, they've said it to advisory, or they believe it?
You know, we meet we meet twice a month, and we're not allowed to talk to each other in between.
All right.
I will tell you, I believe it.
Okay.
All right, can we go with that?
And when you talk about vetting the savings, I'm sure the town administrator is willing to do that. Is that something that your board would also be participating in? I mean, are you trying to vet the potential savings on these ideas, or would you, as you continue this discussion?
I certainly think, you know, any planned reorganization or any planned manner of, you know, getting the work done would have to be, you know, analyzed financially. Yeah, that's part of vetting it.
Okay.
As you know, it all comes down to the initial assumptions you make when you come up with a plan of that sort, and then you have to evaluate, okay, can you meet those assumptions? So,
No, I understand, and I do know there's a time constraint. It's just the way you dismissed this memo by saying it wasn't vetted. I mean, it's okay if you vet it, and it's okay if your board vets it, and I hope they do. I just don't want to hear it hasn't been vetted as a reason not to do it if nobody's trying to vet it. Please vet it.
The issue that I have, and I made it to advisory, I'll make it to you also, is that is a plan which is basically based on a single individual doing 3 jobs. And from my experience in management, that's probably not the best plan, particularly when, you know, there are changes in individuals and in positions, and if that individual leaves, you have 3 positions to fill, and there are not many people that are going to be able to fill 3 positions at the same time. So you're in kind of a pickle.
So your sense is that the agent should be somebody who only has one job, and that's Sherborn's agent? Is that the idea?
Not at all. I'm just saying my sense is that the agent should have a primary responsibility to the Board of Health and have, you know, superior credentials for that because of the variety of things we run into. As you know, we are one of the unique towns that's almost 100% wells and septic, and that is a bit unusual.
Okay.
But
No, thanks for your
I'm
time.
glad I happen to be here.
We mean to haul you in.
Well,
but thank you.
I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you, and thank you very much.
Okay. So what are we doing about this building inspector budget?
Well, I think for purposes of discussion at this point in the process, where there's going to be further hearings and so on, that I'd want to follow the recommendation of the town administrator and go with the budget that saves the taxpayers $25,000. And at the end of the day, it's going to be up to advisory whether they're going to put additional $25,000 into this mix or not. I understand that. But for where I stand, I think I should stand with the town administrator on this. So my motion would be to approve the motion with, approve the budget that was proposed by the town administrator.
Which is an increase in the inspectional budget. And without control over the Board of Health budget and the corresponding decrease.
I didn't,
So how do we do that logistically?
I didn't
if we
increase
follow
it
Paul's motion.
I didn't increase it in your model because there was an
Because of that
unidentified
issue.
funding source, yeah.
I mean, what I heard was a pretty articulate commitment to exploring this option as well as many others. And I agree, it's too soon, you know, the notice of this opportunity has been very 11th hour here, so to try to, for a committee that meets only the way we do, is something difficult to do between now and advisory's public hearing. And I think we have to put forth something to advisory's public hearing and still be able to have the discussion and maybe make some changes. So I respect the fact what Paul's saying, which is to let advisory be the referee on this sort of thing in terms of where the money goes. But I think they can do that with what we submit, which is what we have control over and don't have control over. And so I'm torn between trying to support you, Paul, because you're absolutely right. If we can save 25,000 or something close to that, we're shirking our fiduciary responsibilities to the taxpayers by not pushing for that.
But you're not going to be able to save that 25,000 unless you have identified that funding source,
Right.
which isn't going to happen by the time,
Right.
or that's.
Right, so that's kind of where I'm struggling through this thing here.
But here's, my response to that would be that if we vote in favor of this motion, it does put pressure on everybody in the system. And if we don't put that in there, then basically we're hat in hand saying, we think you ought to do this, we think it's a good idea, but we don't believe it in enough to commit to it ourselves. I think we're better off putting pressure on the system so that there's an incentive for the Board of Health to address this as soon as possible. Town meeting is April 27th. So between now and April 27th, they will have a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions to resolve this. Everything doesn't have to be resolved by March 21st. But if we don't take that step, it really does put it to one side. It's just sort of a thought rather than
Well, what if we put the chairman of advisory on the spot a little bit here?
That's what I was going to do. So, Mary, if we were to follow Paul's recommendation, which I'm kind of inclined to do also for the purposes of keeping the conversation going, how difficult does that make your job as advisory, or are you able to understand why it's being done? And
I understand why it's being done. I'm not sure that you'll get the result that you're looking for from what, on one vote, I don't speak for advisory, but I think David portrayed and Peter also portrayed the feelings of advisory fairly accurately.
you talk about the result we're looking for in the sense that you would actually adopt the budget that we're putting on the table?
Right,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we know that.
yeah.
I
I have no, I have no objection.
Peter, the only reason we would do it, I think, is to keep the conversation going, and I think
Right.
part of what the Board of Selectmen should do is drive conversations
Right.
like this, and we're trying to do that.
I'm good. I mean, it's,
And so logistically, for advisory's
But
public
we-
hearing, sorry, Mary.
no, I was just going to say that we have, we have budgets, and we read the line item for each budget. And, we will vote yea or nay on each one. And so, the budget that we're looking, we need to know what budget we're looking at.
So if you were looking at the higher number, you say you vote nay, then the budget is not funded at all, is that what you're trying to tell us, or?
Well, we can offer, or someone can offer another figure. that we could reapprove a number.
Can I ask a question? At the advisory meeting, was the Board of Health line for the contracts reduced?
Were they,
Or was it talked about being reduced from what it was originally submitted as?
I'm sorry, I don't,
The original budget that Board of Health submitted, was the contract line, did you guys talk about reducing the amount of the contract line, which was, I think, originally 55,000?
and it's down to 49.
It was adjusted down to 49. And what was?
And the other thing that was adjusted down was $6,000 for inspections was adjusted down to either buy or, it was, maybe it was 6,500 and it went down 3,000, or it went down to 3,000.
Went down
1,500,
And what
okay.
was the purpose of those
And that was
reductions?
because they said that they discovered that the original number was for 4 inspections per year, and they're now aware of the fact that they need not do 4 inspections per year, and so they budgeted for fewer inspections per year.
So can I just ask,
We
again,
offered
just,
a $6,500 reduction in our budget at the advisory committee.
so if you adopt what Paul's suggesting, does that mean you're also putting in a lower number? If the town accountant's office or you or somebody, maybe the numbers that advisory is going to read at their public hearing and into the model? The lower number, yeah, not the number that Peter currently believes is the budget that the Board of Health has currently submitted with the changes that Peter just described, but additional reductions for this model that Paul's made a motion on.
My motion is to increase the
Selectmen's budget.
selectmen
Yeah.
inspection department
Okay.
by
And
an
not
amount
touch the Board of
necessary
Health.
to pay for him to do the whole job. And if advisory adopts that, we have the funding to do this, and the funding that's currently in the Board of Health's budget would be necessary. If they decide they're going to do something different and fund some other model, then when it comes to this budget, they will move to recommend an appropriation that wouldn't include the amount that I'm suggesting be included today. And I'm getting the sense that right now that's maybe where they're at, but at least gives us an opportunity to say, you ought not to change the budget that we've submitted because we think there's good reason to do so.
I'm not sure I followed all of that, but I think what we're saying is that we're gonna increase the inspectional budget under the Board of Selectmen, which will be in addition to the current deficit we're showing on this thing, an increase in that deficit. Because we're not touching the Board of Health's budget as submitted. Okay,
That's what it would do.
okay. And we'll have that discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, for purposes of the
Yeah,
advisory
that's fine.
hearing, as long as Mary understands
Second.
that we're doing that in good faith, I think that's a good way to do it.
So I need to submit revised budget pages
Yeah.
for the inspections department.
That's what we're saying.
So I seconded your motion.
I think you said it well, that it's our fiduciary duty as taxpayers and as representatives of the taxpayers to present and advocate for ideas that save the taxpayers money.
Katie, you had some,
I, just one question, do you have a conflict of interest with the building inspector also being the inspector of, if he's doing septic inspections
No.
together?
I think so.
I'm just asking, it just seems
I mean,
conflicting.
you're representing the town in both respects. It's not like he's working on the private side and on the public side.
It seems like a conflict to me, but that's me.
So, anything else? Sean, you had something?
Sean Killeen, 1 Butler Street. While I'm in favor of saving money and big changes to the Board of Health, as you guys are probably all aware, I would caution on the pressure you don't want to put is on the people that have business in front of the Board of Health. And that's speaking from someone that left their meeting at almost midnight the other day. They have a lot of business that they're trying to attend to, and those people need that on a timely manner. So if there's any interruption in service from the Board of Health agent, they'll far
Yeah,
outweigh what
I
you
don't
say.
think we could unilaterally do that anyway. As Peter made eminently clear, they're in charge of their own staff
Understood,
and their own agent.
but pressuring them from the budget side might just,
Well, we're not doing anything to their budget, we're not touching their
Unintentional
budget.
consequences.
We can't, we don't control their budget, we're not
Right.
touching it, and we're not making a recommendation on it. This is just the inspection budget. So we have a motion, a second, any further discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Could I also have a vote to remove the take-home vehicle program from the police department?
So moved. Second, all in favor? Aye, good, we've got that. Okay, treasurer budget is the next one. David, you want to do a presentation on this?
Yeah.
How did it change from your last time and why?
The last time that we were in front of advisory, we had what we were referring to as a treasurer-only budget and a town accountant's adjusted budget, preparing for a consolidated finance department, which is what some of the articles were pointing towards. So the only thing that was left in the treasurer's budget was funding the elected treasurer. There was the assistant position was now located under the town accountant as an admin position dedicated to the purpose of treasury. And we've checked out that as a finance director, the town accountant can oversee a treasury function. They just can't hold cash. So after that last discussion, we moved that admin position back into the treasurer's budget. So it's no longer a treasurer's only budget. What I have reflected in there is the elected treasurer at 15 hours at the same hourly rate as the other elected officials, the town clerk and the tax collector. And then I have the the assistant treasurer position funded at a lower hourly rate, which is the same as the administrative assistants in the town accountant's office, but that's for 15 hours. So that's why, but the town accountant's budget really only changes by shifting that at one admin person back into the treasurer's budget. So there was it was brought to me today or yesterday that the 15 hours that I included for the elected treasurer was not what the board had intended, that the intention was to increase it from 10 hours to 12 hours, not 10 hours to 15 hours. So if the intent of the board is to have it at 12, we have to adjust the budget again.
This is 15 now?
It's 15 now.
And how many hours is the assistant?
The assistant is budgeted there at 15.
So they're both at 15. I have another question, David, in terms of the expense side of things. It's certain that we're going to have a new treasurer next year, which would mean, probably some additional training and those kinds of costs, and I'm wondering if that's built into this budget.
There's no extra money for additional, we split out the payroll benefits person, put that person into the accountant, and split the expenses almost down the middle. But we did not increase expenses, and assuming that there was going to be needed training other than what has already been budgeted in there in the past.
Well, for example, the meetings and seminar item for the town accountant is $460, but for the treasurer, it's only $50. It seems to me that that would be something that would appropriately maybe be reversed, or at least more even.
Like I said, all we did was take it out of the treasurer's. We split it in half what he had already had in existing budget and moved that into the town accountants, assuming that was for the payroll benefits person.
I guess I would just urge you to move that back.
Then,
But that's for, you're just saying that's for neither the treasurer nor the town accountants, for the payroll person. And as I understood what he said was the payroll person happens to be in the other budget and not in the earlier budget.
So they're the ones being trained?
Yeah.
They have to attend payroll tax law classes. It's highly recommended to make sure that they stay current at least once a year.
I'm just concerned
We can-
we're gonna have a gap, you know, having lost, you know, once David leaves, having lost 2 experienced treasurers in the course of a year, it would be good to have at least an item that suggests, you know, we want whoever the new treasurer is to be able to come up to speed quickly and.
So, under the treasurer, other charges,
Yeah,
it says due, where were you intending to increase it?
I don't know, I'm asking you that, I'm asking,
It looks like there was 50 taken out for meetings, so you would want to restore that back to 100.
is that what it was?
Yes.
But I think you're saying somebody new coming into this might have to take some accelerated training and
I would
whether
think- I
there's
would
a
think
need
so.
for that. I think that makes sense. I don't know what the treasurer world requires for training.
As a
Whether
former
there should be
treasurer,
some budget for that. yeah.
there is an annual conference when they provide training. It's for 3 days at UMass Amherst. And the fees are dependent on if you're part of the Mass Collector Treasurer Association. So if you're a non-member, it's higher, otherwise it's lower. I think last August it was $150, but I'd have to double check that figure. If you stay on campus, it's about $100 a night. If you're off campus at a different hotel, it's about $120 per night. So as far as the
So
travel,
$50 won't cover that, right?
Yeah, probably not.
well, the travel item is in line. If anything, we need to increase the
travel.
meetings, maybe $100 to $150.
So the $350 for travel would cover the lodging and the
Correct.
travel potentially?
I mean, the whole section as a whole that the treasurer would have available to them, as it stands right now, is $845. That's down $30 from the current year.
And I guess I would suggest putting it up a little bit,
But-
maybe,
so we
maybe
could
make
put-
1,000 or something like that.
Change the meetings from 50 to 100, and then put in,
Well, I think I would just say it was 150.
change meetings to 150? And then travel to 400?
Just an FYI, the travel in the treasurer's budget also includes all the weekly trips that have to be made to the bank. It's only about $25 a month for mileage, but there is about $25 a month because the treasurer has to go make the cash deposits at the local branches. So that travel is not conference related. It's related to doing the daily business, the weekly business of the treasurer's department.
But if we're increasing the meetings, the likelihood of going to other conferences, I get to increase some mileage for travel as well.
Right, but I'm saying if you
Right.
take $25 a month times 12 months, you're already,
So you're there.
you're
So I think what
already
she's
at
saying
what
is
you're
this
telling
doesn't
me
cover
the travel
lodging, so you
budget
need a
is.
few $100s more, is what I'm hearing.
Right.
So we need to put that out.
So add some extra money to address that.
Make it we could make it $650. The
Yeah,
300
I
covers the
think that's,
lodging.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
It's odd, because it was $315 last year and $600 the year before.
All right, so 650 is probably the right number then.
$650?
So 150 and 650 on those 2 line items, is that what we're talking
Okay.
about?
Yeah, we
Makes
just
sense.
doubled it, which is good.
300.
And you're back to the hours
Sure.
discussion? So the,
12.
we had, the last meeting, last week, you had 10 hours for that, which was based on the consultant's analysis.
What we
And
took-
I think the board talked of, put a squish factor in there of 20% or so to get to 12. So I don't know, 12 or
What-
15, what makes sense?
What we had taken to advisory was the analysis of just the treasurer-only core,
Yes.
core functions, 10 hours a week, 520 hours. When we added up what the hours that we expected the treasurer to focus on those in a year, it was around 400, so there was like 25% built in.
Right.
And then you agreed to put additional
About
hours in
20%,
there.
yeah.
I put 5 in there, but maybe it was proposed as 2, I don't,
It was, but
because I thought that's what we proposed and talked about adding in there.
That was,
I thought it was 2, right? I thought we were going to 12 hours. But
It's 15 right now. So,
so it went from 10, it doubled by, it went to 50% increase, and you were proposing a 20% increase?
well, that's what I thought we had talked about, but, so I'm just looking for what, you got to have something in there.
But what I gather you're saying is that you didn't get to the 5 hours as being what you thought was right. That was, the 5 hours is what you recalled was asked, when in fact it was 2 hours that was asked. Is that a fair summary?
Right, I added
Yeah.
5 in because I thought that's what was being added in.
No, I thought we were talking a 20% sort of cushion,
Yeah.
I don't think there's a
Based on-
big
so.
difference in the 12 or the 15, but,
Well, could do individual stuff,
But the consultant said 10,
yes.
right?
right. But if we left it at 15, we could reduce the assistant. Right now, you have 30 hours between the two
But
positions.
we don't have the Schedule 5 here, so last year, under the old way, if you will, okay, how many hours for treasurer and assistant were in there?
Currently, the treasurer is
Previously, yeah,
budgeted
this year's
at
budget.
22 hours, and the assistant treasurer is budgeted at 8 hours.
So that's 30 hours.
So right now, what you have is a treasurer budgeted at 15, and an assistant budgeted at 15.
We also know that previously the treasurer was doing a lot of payroll processing and benefits administration. and
There would be
stuff like
some,
that that's all already moved over, right?
yeah, some
Still some
80% of it,
interaction.
right. The retirement has to stay in treasurers.
Understood.
And I know, I did speak to Heather about it too today. She would offer some comments if she had the chance.
But before you get there, I'm trying to figure out, Peter, 12 or 15?
Well, I thought we were comfortable with 10, and so I only thought, well, just because you could look, and there were some questions about some of the line items in the consulting report that we looked at, and we knew that 10 was 520 versus the 400 and something total hours that were projected. So 10 was already sufficient to cover the statutory duties according to that report, right? But then the thought was, well, because there were some question marks about a few line items, even though they might have been insignificant, they could be off. And so that's where the suggestion of a cushion of another 20%. So, but you put a cushion of 50%.
Yeah, and I guess I would,
Misunderstood. huh?
I guess even though it's a mistake, I guess I would argue to reduce the hours on the assistant.
On the assistant.
If you're assuming that the person has to get up to speed or isn't going to be able to attack those core duties like
Yeah,
we
I mean, the other thing is, this is a position, because it's an elected official, there's no accountability for the time anyway. But it is a means by which one determines the compensation.
It's basically a salaried position.
Yes.
When you break it into hours and the hourly rate, it's just for our system.
I'd leave the 15, and if you needed to come down on the assistant, do that.
Yeah, I have no real thoughts. I think whether you're 12 or 15, based on the statutory duties and that analysis we looked at, it seemed to make sense. We got plenty of time in there.
So reduce the assistant 2, 3, 5?
I don't know what the assistant does. See, we only really looked at
I
what
wouldn't
the treasurer statutory.
Well,
duties.
primarily, they're doing the bulk of the hours because they're receiving cash. I mean,
They're doing
that's,
the work, right? A lot of the work.
I mean, that's how we have it.
So I wouldn't want to take away
So
from
you don't
that
wanna-
position. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where the grunt work happens.
So Peter, you're the financial guy. I'm not the financial guy.
Yeah, but
I'm just a simple lawyer. So tell me where you're at on this.
Well, I was comfortable with 12. I don't have a problem with 15. I thought we had an analysis. We all bought in. The 10 seemed plenty. I just thought it'd be nice to have a little cushion there for the unknowns.
Well, right now, originally, we had 30 hours devoted to the treasury operation. Right now, you have 30 hours devoted to the treasury operation.
But some of
we
the tasks have moved over.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so it's inconsistent.
you should reflect some sort of reduction somewhere, and it would probably be better to reflect that in the assistant position.
We got some comments from the audience. Nancy?
A few questions?
Yeah, after Nancy, yep, definitely, George.
I know you can't hear me if I don't come to the microphone. There's a real problem with this because the estimates that were given on time were based on a structure that we don't have, and we don't have an assistant. So the treasurer is basically going to be doing all of the work until they can organize their office however they want and determine how many hours they need to actually do the work. Now, as a member of the finance team, it troubles me to think that we are expecting someone to do a job that has been done by someone who's been doing it for 38 years and probably can do it with their eyes closed, and expect them to do it in so much less time. Now, I know the payroll was taken out of there, but the treasurer didn't actually do the payroll function, oversaw it, and there will still have to be some oversight because the treasurer is responsible for all of that. But my problem is that there will be no assistant. I'm assuming that our new accountant will give some help where that's possible. But I would suggest that because town meeting sets the salary, and once the salary is set, you can't go back and adjust it if you find it's not working. And I certainly would hope that morally you would not expect someone to come in there and put 30 hours in and be paid for 15. I would suggest that you put the entire salary sum into the treasurer's budget and allow the treasurer to decide. The treasurer can reduce the salary to pay someone else. The treasurer cannot increase the salary that's voted at town meeting. So I think it's very unfair to think that you had an assistant in there this year at 15 to 17 hours or whatever, and you had an interim treasurer doing these jobs. To think that this can be done in such a compressed time on a model that we don't have, I think is very, very unfair to anybody, whether it's an elected treasurer or an appointed treasurer, whatever, to expect them to come in new. We already know that when someone comes into a new job, it takes some time to get up to speed. To expect them to do that job, which is an important job, you want your money watched. Even if it doesn't mean that that day you have to move it somewhere, you want someone to be on top of what has to happen. And we have things unique to Sherborn that I'm not sure that they were even explored with the former treasurer. So to take another town's model and say, we can attach this many minutes, I know from my own job that if I tried to attach time to something, it never fits, and it never works out to be what you expect. So I would urge you, I would ask you, please don't do this to the treasurer's budget. Wait till you get your structure in line and you know what your needs are before you try to do something like this with the compensation. This just would not be fair. And if the treasurer's office doesn't work, it's a reflection on everybody in the finance department, because we are each a piece of that wheel. And if any one of us that is not successful in the job that we do, it makes it so the rest of it doesn't work either. So please fund this office appropriately for this year. Certainly not less than what has been done in the past. And if you must reduce the hours because you think that there's going to be less work because you've got the payroll moved over, that person was doing that job under the former treasurers, and you've taken that chunk and moved it over. It really doesn't affect what the treasurer has to do. But if in your own mind you think you can reduce it some, don't take that much out. At least have enough funding there for 20 hours of work. And whether you do it under the idea that an assistant will be brought in, fund it under the treasurer, because the treasurer won't have an assistant when they start. And however long it takes to get an assistant, we don't know that. And when you're giving the responsibility of that office, which is a very big responsibility, to someone, you ought to let them put it together the way it works for them. I don't know whether you read the paper tonight from the Middlesex News, but you want your money watched. because things can happen if it is not. And we have different issues that come up with payments and bonding and that kind of stuff that has to be anticipated. Someone needs to take time to spend on that. So I urge you, please, fund this appropriately, and what you're talking about is not appropriately. I'm glad you added some money to professional development, but beyond the school, the Department of Revenue has right away a seminar for new officials finance forum, and the MCTA has a new officials thing, and those things run between $50 and $25 each time. And the MCTA has at least 3 or 4, and the Department of Revenue has the new officials, and then they have what's new in municipal law, which is very important to the function of the office. So please put money into this budget that makes it work so that we can keep our treasurer up to speed with professional development and we had one of the finest finance teams. Let's build that back up again, please. Thank you.
David, can you answer a question which is,
Well, there's more hands up.
I understand, I just have a question. We have an assistant treasurer line item for 15 and 16 that didn't exist in 14 and 13. I'm reacting to Nancy's comment saying fund this the way the office was previously funded. The funding for the treasurer prior to this past year was 42.5, roughly 42,000 for just the treasurer line item, and there was no assistant. Now we're proposing a treasurer and an assistant, and the amount, at least at this point, is 48, I think.
Mike, I would have to question if that's correct, because I've been functioning as the assistant treasurer and getting paid for 5 years now, so.
It's not, it's not in this budget.
So
It's,
your budget may not accurately reflect
Is
reality.
that the permanent part-time, David? Is that what you're?
Well, I'm wondering where she would have been charged, because in the current year, the assistant treasurer is appropriated in the right place.
15 and 16.
In years past, I don't know where it was charged to, because it's not there.
Probably temporary part-time, it looks like, right?
Yes, right. It would be the temporary part-time line. Yeah, so the temporary part-time line was moved to the
geography
assistant
in this
treasurer.
Schedule.
Got moved up, okay.
Right.
So those are the equivalent of.
Yeah.
So it was there. But it should be correctly under assistant treasurer where it is now.
Right.
You could, you could just decide what you want to fund for the whole salaries line and put it all in the elected officials, as Nancy was saying. That's how it originally existed when Pete didn't have an assistant. It was budgeted for 30 hours, and then at some point when he decided he needed an assistant, he carved out 8 hours. Nancy had the same setup in her office. She carved hours out of her total allotment to create an assistant.
But this isn't legal. What the statute says is 41-108 something, is that the salary of elected officials has to be voted by town meeting, not only by town meeting, it has to be for that elected official. It's not a department budget, it's not a lump sum. You have to vote a specific compensation for that elected official.
And they can't reduce their own
That's the
compensation.
vote. It still has to be, that's the compensation for the official. It's not let the official decide what their salary is.
Maybe that's one of the unusual things about Sherborn that Nancy.
Well,
It's not legal. Well, maybe it's done in Sherborn, but.
Well, no, the total dollar amount would be as compensation for the elected official, but they would carve out of that to
No,
create their, they can't do that.
The elected official has to have a set salary.
Well, this is town council territory, but, George, you had a comment, I think?
No, I have questions.
The question?
Number one, I recognize that selectmen are in kind of a unique situation this year, but notwithstanding that, there must be some general principles that carry over. If you overfunded the treasurer's budget and it wasn't spent, what would happen to the money that was represented the overfunding?
It would lapse back into the general fund
It would go back into the general fund.
at the end of the year.
But not
So that,
compensation for an elected official, that would get paid.
Not the compensation line, that would all be paid out to whomever.
But if the elected official decided to reduce the number of hours that he or she was going to work, would the compensation go down accordingly?
That's what I was assuming, but that,
That's essentially
You
what
don't
happened.
vote an hourly rate, you vote
I understand.
it's like a salary.
But I can recall that the former treasurer reduced his hours. I'm not sure when he reduced the hours, whether it was before the salary was set or after the salary was set. But in order to bring in people to assist him, myself included, he reduced the hours that he worked in order to provide compensation to the assistants that he brought in. Was he violating the law somehow?
well, he was
Probably
in,
did it before town meeting,
No.
and so,
No,
no?
both of us, we were told by personnel that we could do that as long as we kept within the hours that were allowed.
the treasurer oversaw payroll, so they can do it at any time.
So wait, who, Nancy?
The personnel committee and the treasurer, in my case, and the accountant, all agreed that we could do this. As long as we didn't exceed, if we were exceeding hours, we had to go to personnel to get a change in hours, but.
Well, I didn't want to hear this because,
Whether you want to hear it or not.
You certainly don't want to hear it on
System.
cable television.
right, it's like saying, we drove 120 miles an hour and everything was fine.
Okay, can I
So-
continue?
Yeah, George, George has some
Tell me.
questions.
I don't want to interrupt the selectmen, but I do think
Go
I
ahead.
have the floor. So, since your discussion about the Board of Health indicated, the chair indicated that the Board of Health set its budget and that you really couldn't mess around with it, isn't that a fair statement of what you said?
We'll get to your point, George. What's the point?
My point is that you are an acting treasurer. You have appointed an acting
That's right.
treasurer. But you can't assume that there's going to be an appointed treasurer next year. So notwithstanding the consultant that you paid money for, who's never been a town treasurer, and the fact that you've got at least one sponsored article that says that you're looking to make an appointed treasurer, you may end up with an elected treasurer, which then should have the ability to run his or her office. So why wouldn't you just take the budget that you had for the last elected treasurer and duplicate it this year, since you're not gonna lose money if you get an appointed one, because any money that appointed one saves goes back to the general fund.
Well, it's funny, but we've got an interim treasurer who's been in that office all year, and he's advising us on what's needed for that
Well,
office.
that's why I said you were in a unique position.
I think it's a
difficult
uniquely
one.
good position
And a
because,
difficult one.
well, it's difficult, but it's also good. We've got eyes on the inside who's kind of figured out what
But
needs
the
to happen in
town-
that office.
The interim treasurer didn't perform the function of the treasurer, did he?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
No, right now we have 15 hours devoted. It could stand to have more hours. And I don't know what hours I'm doing, but it's certainly not 15 as provided for in the budget. But there's a
But did
lot,
you perform
there's a
all
lot
the
more that
functions
could
of
be
the
done.
treasurer?
Right.
You performed them all.
No,
Oh, you
I
did
said
not.
that there's always more that can be done. Yes,
So, again, I'm saying to you, wouldn't it be prudent to fund the office of treasurer as if it was the same elected office that the treasurer retired from? Given the fact that if you get the appointed treasurer and you move things around that you can move, because you can't move everything, you know that already, any money that's saved will go back to the general fund.
I think what we're hearing is salary money will not go back to the general fund. I think we just established that through Paul.
Well, that's true, but at some point,
But if it's appointed.
it's appointed, you.
Well, I don't think anybody's talking about an appointed treasurer budget. This is a budget that we're talking about as a selectman recommendation
You know,
for a budget for the office of the treasurer, however that's filled. At this point,
However
it's an
that's
elected
filled.
position, yeah.
and if you underfund it, what is the treasurer, elected treasurer supposed to do?
I think part of the issue is that we hired a finance director, essentially. We hired a town accountant. But she's a bit of a superstar
I
and has
understand
been a
that.
finance director.
I'm not saying anything.
And so the
about that.
question is, how do we fund the finance director?
Well,
And where's that money gonna come from? And part of the funding for that is to move some functions that the treasurer had been added to because he was good.
You can't add
can't
functions that are required by statute.
We're not talking about,
No.
I think Paul had the floor on this one, George.
Over the years, because Pete was there for 38 years, we kept asking him to do stuff. So in effect, he was doing stuff beyond a treasurer. He was really operating like a finance director. But now we want to head for a finance director position, which you, in fact, spoke in favor of a couple of meetings ago.
Absolutely.
And in order to fund that position, some of the finance director functions, which had been spinning off in different directions, are moving back and needs to be paid for. And so some of the funding for that, which was done as part of the treasurer's job, really needs to go to pay for the person we've hired, who's now a full-time position as opposed to a part-time position that we had before. So we don't want to go to...
Do we have a list of the functions that you propose to move from the treasurer's scope of duties to the finance director's scope of duties?
So we'll have Michael address that since he did the consulting study.
No. The statute provides what can be moved and what can't be moved.
Yes, that was the point of the study. So I think a couple observations. I think Nancy actually made a good case for what we originally proposed. We have a full-time town accountant. We have a warrant article that has a broad support to make that a finance director. And I think that individual is the right person to hire and be responsible for people doing transactional activity for this town. Our departments are being urged across the board, whether it's CM&D, the schools, the police, to do things in new ways to save money. And I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to leverage the resources and the skills that we have with Irene to oversee people who are responsible for the day-to-day transactional activities of the town. And as part of that, we went through a very careful assessment of a 250-page MCTA manual. We identified exactly the items that needed to remain with the treasurer. We gave reasonable estimates for the length of time to do those. We rounded up from there, and then subsequently it's been rounded up either another 2 to 5 hours per week, because I'm still a little confused at where you guys ended up on that. The other part that I'm kind of mystified is if this was my business, I would prefer to have somebody independently processing the cash deposits from the treasurer who's responsible for reconciling the bank statement. As it is now, Nancy's right. Cash and maintaining a careful eye on cash is the largest risk for this town. But for 30 years, we've continued to process cash in a way that increases that risk because we have many, many different collection points, no point of receipt at those spots, no accountability with the time that the cash is handed over from the payee to the collector. Then paper transactions are put together and then they all come back, and currently they're being processed by Heather. I think we were working towards a model that was cost efficient, that kept a very careful eye on segregation of duties, was leveraging the investment we made in a town accountant finance director position, and was in the spirit of what we, David and I, had interpreted from the work coming out of the governance task force. So the fact that the position moved back in under a part-time individual who's not necessarily being elected for any range of managerial skills, when we have somebody who can manage an individual in that role, could post for that position knowing that that somebody's going to be resigning from it come election day, seems a logical way to manage this, and it's healthy for the town. I mean, you guys encouraged the police department to continue to look for innovations. This is something we can do to move the town forward.
Can I make a comment? I think that the presentation by Michael, the observation that he made a reasonable effort to make a determination of how many hours it should take, from a man who never performed the function, seems a little stretch. But more important,
We've got somebody here who's been in the treasurer's department for 15
I mean,
years.
for
Exactly.
50
Let me finish. We'll get to the
Excuse me,
point.
What's the point?
I was asked not to interrupt once before by the chair. I would ask the chair to ask other people to give the same courtesy that you asked from me to me.
So George, we'll just,
Okay,
what's
I'm
the
trying
point?
to get
No
the-
big buildup. What's the point?
What I'm suggesting to you is that there are so many unknowns in the model that you think you're gonna have next year, that it makes more sense, from my point of view, given the fact that you can't lose the money, to keep the budget that you had with the elected treasurer, until you can articulate what that treasurer was doing, that he doesn't have to do anymore. Now, I asked Paul if he could enumerate them, and what I got was Michael telling me that he went through a very long manual.
Well,
No, this was,
No,
this,
I didn't
David
ask
was,
you a question.
David was in this role. David's been overseeing this position. He and I worked through this collectively. And when you say I haven't done these things, well, that's actually incorrect. I have reconciled bank statements in a variety of situations
You haven't
many
done
times in the
town
past.
treasurer's job, have you?
I can say, I mean, for 15 years, I've either been a treasurer or supervising a treasurer's office. And the new town accountant has been a treasurer and a finance director overseeing a treasurer. So I did oversee the work, and I thought it was adequate. That's why we even built in a margin of error I thought was pretty significant beyond. I mean, that's where we originally were, and we had articles on the table of a consolidated finance department. We had a number of other proposals there too, that when we started this, that's what we were, trying to accommodate. And when-
Could I ask Michael a question? Just, Michael,
Ask George if you can ask Michael a question.
so, Michael, the assistant treasurer position was over under the town accountant. It's been pushed over to here under this model, which it wasn't before. I'm just curious where.
Recommendation, yes.
And you think it's the assistant treasurer duties and so forth belong under the treasurer here versus under the town accountant, future finance,
No.
presumably finance director?
No,
I'm
my-
trying to get what you
No,
think is.
our original recommendation, which at the time, at your last meeting that I sat in, you voted for,
Yes.
was an individual, a transfer of the person who is Heather's role right now, which is to process those cash
Yeah.
deposits, is to go under the supervision of the town accountant. It's a very comparable set of financial accounting, transaction types of tasks that is going on in a payroll function or an AP function. And in fact, at the central business office for the school district is what the business manager is responsible for.
Yeah. So you
there's-
think
this
it's the
model
right
is-
place for it over there?
Absolutely, because you've gone through a rigorous evaluation and hiring process for Irate to become our town accountant, and if there's support at town meeting, to become a finance director. And part of a finance manager's responsibilities is to know how to manage and develop, hire, recruit, retain, and review financial staff that are in these types of AP, payroll, cash depository roles. It's the logical structure for this, and I think other people coming from other organizations would support that. I don't believe that the town of Sherborn is such a unique beast that it can't organize itself in a way that the central office for the region does, or many other organizations in municipalities.
Yeah, so one of the things we had talked about and I was kind of struggling with was the right place for that assistant treasurer role or the functions that role would perform. And it was originally under the town accountant, finance director. There's discussions where let's maybe consider moving it back over here for political reasons, if nothing else, right? But yeah, you have your flashlight on, Kitty, you're blinding us.
Oh, I'm
Yeah. But then, so I wasn't sure where I thought it best belonged. But then you guys did this debt offering here. And I was really impressed with the broadened capabilities that we do have on our staff. And so I've come around to thinking, geez, I liked it better under, and for a lot of the reasons that Michael just described, the daily supervision and all of that sort of thing. So, That's where I'm starting to come around.
So we're,
So I prefer it over there under the town accountant for the assistant, this assistant piece. I think that there's no lack of cooperation that's gonna come out of it in terms of, geez, I need help with this analysis or that analysis being requested by anybody in a treasurer role. It will be able to be done by the finance director's office. So I think it's where we have.
where I'm
is the
coming
right
from is
place.
I believe in Irene and
Yes.
her capabilities, and I've seen her perform, and I know that she can do amazing things for this town. So I want to be sure she has the resources.
Right.
And if governance's recommendation is adopted at town meeting, I want her to have the tools to do amazing things for this town. And it was wonderful that Pete took on all these things and tried to do all these things. Pete was an amazing guy in his own right and was here for 38 years. But Pete's no longer here. And so I don't think we should build a model based on Pete, because he's gone. I think we should base a model on what we have, which is Irene. And therefore, I would, again, I'm not a financial type, but I would lean towards giving her whatever resources she needs, and for her to have the ability to manage. She's full-time, so she'd be there to manage whatever staff is there to make sure everything gets done right. So I would lean towards strengthening the town accountant as much as we can.
Hey, Heather, you had your hand up. I don't know if you want to be heard or.
I don't know if I want to be heard.
Okay.
I'm profoundly disappointed. I can just say that. First of all, I have been here for 5 years, and I've been quiet during the meetings for this season because I've been watching the process unfold. I've had tremendously in-depth conversations with David. As a taxpayer, as a voter, as someone who's been to town meeting and raised my hand and gone to the ballot, we have heard our taxpayers say twice, last April and again in October, leave the position alone for the interim. Please, let's see what happens with the 5-member selectmen board. Let's follow through what the governance board is recommending in terms of adding a finance director and developing some of Michael's analysis, which I think a lot of it is really spot on, and I'm 100% behind. I'm not behind an appointed position as a taxpayer for the town of Sherborn. I think that this department, the finance department, the people within it should evolve. We should move with the times. We should look at strategies and innovations for the future. But you heard from your taxpayers last April and again in October, we're not ready. They told you that. They voted that way. And so we have an elected position again this year. And I'm full disclosure, yes, I have put my name in to run for that, but that is not why I'm advocating right now. I'm advocating because I have done the assistant treasurer's job for 5 years, almost 5 years in August. It'll be 5 years. And with David's assistance and as a team, we have fulfilled the responsibilities of the department since Pete's departure. What I have been doing is not a 15-hour-a-week job. It's not. And to say that what I do is collect cash is a gross misunderstatement of the functions that I provide as a professional to the town of Sherborn. This week alone, I received and dispersed millions of dollars of money, millions of dollars to pay off bonds, to receive bonds, to fund payroll, all of those things. I am a bonded professional finance team member with significant responsibilities. That is, yes, I have been the assistant treasurer despite the fact that I have not been appointed to that in over 3 years, but I've been performing all the functions. But I think you guys are putting the cart ahead of the horse, if I might. We will get there. We will. That is everybody's goal, is to bring this finance department with Irene as a new member, and I as well have been incredibly impressed and know that either in a role as assistant treasurer or as elected treasurer, she's got a lot to teach. and a lot that I can gain from her, but she's also been here a month and a half. Let's give her time to get up to speed, to learn our department, to learn our town, to get her feet wet, to learn this cast of characters, and to get to know the new board, because we will have a new board. So what I'm asking is please, please, please respect the fact that your taxpayers have told you, please leave this alone for the time being. Please fund the treasurer's department so that the elected treasurer, and it may not be me, because someone can still pull out papers, can do this job, can have a staff person working with them to get the very important responsibilities of the town done. It is not about receiving cash. It's not. It's so much more than that. And the bond issue this week is a perfect example. Now, yes, Irene and David were in front of you doing a lot of the paperwork, but I was behind the scenes and I was moving money and I was calling banks and I was ensuring that we had Fed confirmation numbers. That was not all done in a bubble. It was done as a team. Don't eviscerate the team. Don't eviscerate the treasurer's functions and give it to somebody else yet. Let's go through this process. Let's take this year. Let's learn together. And next year, when we go into fiscal year 17, if it's appointed and the staff person moves, I'm not going to fight it. But let's give it time to figure out if that's actually the right moves. And that's what I had to say.
I don't think we're eviscerating anything. I think we addressed exactly those types of skills that she talked about, which is overseeing cash flow and those transfers. Those stay with the treasurer, who is a specialist position, and for a town our size, we can only afford so much skill for there. And again, the transactional
We can't make
components.
this a debate, Michael. Katie, you had
Just, I happen to be a person who likes to put full numbers. You've swung, taken roughly $73,000 out of the treasurer's budget and increased the accountant's budget by roughly $92,000.
That's right.
So that's a $19,000 difference. And in the accountant's office, the salary line item is now increased by $24,500 for the increased hours. So what's the big argument? You've set up the treasurer's department for an elected treasurer and for an assistant treasurer. And then you've got the others over there. I don't see why you're debating all this, why you're trying to take more hours out of the treasurer. It's peanuts.
Well, I think we've already covered that ground, so,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and
To me, the issue
the
was-
numbers you're talking about, Katie, are the numbers that are in this model?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we
it
had
was
gone from,
submitted to you last 48 hours in advance for me.
But, no, but this model that, that shows the 15-hour totals.
Right. I'm working with a total of,
So I mean, I'm trying to understand, is your suggestion to take money out of the accounting
no, I'm
budget
suggesting
model in
just-
here and put it in treasurer, or?
I'm suggesting you leave what
Don't
David
mess with it,
presented at
Pearson.
15 hours for the treasurer and the assistant treasurer, leave them alone.
Can-
It's peanut money.
Can I ask, Heather, you didn't weigh in on that, on the,
Yeah,
on this
and
list.
you and I talked about this as
Right.
well. You know, I was a very unique hire for Pete because I was running a bookkeeping business. My husband had just been unemployed. We needed a little bit more money, and 8 hours a week was a great fit to something that I already had going on. And it just worked out that 8 hours a week was okay. As you go into a new position where you have to train somebody, where quite frankly, you're really only giving them potentially a year's commitment because the elected treasurer is only fulfilling the remaining year of Pete's retired term. You're not really looking for someone long-term. If we have somebody who might come in and do some of the functions, that would be great. But really, all you can say to this person is, we're going to be going through an evaluative process over the next year to restructure this department. So really, you know, by the time May comes and the person is elected and then starts to do the interview process and hire the person, you're potentially looking at at max 8 months of service that you're hiring the assistant treasurer for. So to go to something Nancy said, but for maybe different reasons, David and I spoke about the fact that that elected treasurer, whoever that person may be, is probably going to be doing 100% of the functions within that role. That it is very unlikely that an assistant treasurer will be put into place in the 9 months between, or 12 months between election to election.
So that's an argument for just the single.
I believe
number?
it is. I believe that what you want to do is provide the opportunity for somebody to effectively perform the treasury function, and it's probably going to be an individual without a department underneath them.
So are you saying that the 22 hours and the 8, just like it's currently budgeted? Or were you saying
It's
all
hard
the
to say. When we talk about moving the benefits, again, I would like to weigh in as someone who sits in that department, and I believe probably 2 hours of benefit oversight was probably moved over. 2 hours a week. I don't think it's much more than that. Debbie Reynolds does the majority of the payroll and benefit functions. The oversight is not a major part of what was Pete's job, and Irene, I'm not going to speak on your behalf, but I don't believe it was a major part of Pete's job. I don't think it was a huge chunk of a transfer of responsibility from treasurer function over to town accountant function. But you could do one of two things. You could leave the 22 and 8. I believe 22 hours would be sufficient for an elected official to come in and really do this job. I do. It would be better if that person also had an 8-hour assistant. But I think at 22 hours, the treasurer could do the work. And like I said, I think it's very unlikely, especially given Irene's experience and her willingness to assist on things like the bonds and all of that kind of stuff. I think funding the treasurer at 22, the assistant at 8, leave it as is for this year, and let's work as a team to make this move forward. But putting that treasurer down to 15 hours a week, what you're basically asking the treasurer to do is probably put in a significant number of hours a week for no compensation, or for a much reduced per hour rate. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, the original intent was that, with that first model, was the treasurer would be a specialist focusing only on higher level activities, and the bulk of the hours were placed in the administrative person or the assistant treasurer. Right.
But again,
And that's what, that's what we're looking at now, shifting that back. So,
But wouldn't we want to hire an assistant treasurer no matter what?
well, the hiring of the assistant treasurer is up to the treasurer. It's provided for them by statute. They don't have to hire an assistant. They could choose to do the whole job on their
I'm
own.
talking about the clerical work. If there's no assistant treasurer, let's say the treasurer decides not to hire an assistant treasurer, whatever reasons, she's indicated a number of reasons, maybe hard to hire somebody. Is there a body who can do those jobs somewhere in the system? Shouldn't we provide funding for it so the town accountant can hire someone, or you, the town administrator, can hire somebody, or the treasurer can hire somebody, whether you call it an assistant treasurer or not, to do whatever needs to be done?
Yes, you could do a budget transfer to transfer it out of the treasurer's office, to fund and add a part-time or supplemental admin position, just as Pete had it funded as temporary part-time before. We reflect it now, all those dollars under assistant treasurer, but if the next treasurer was not going to have an assistant, that money could be used for temporary part-time help.
So why not move the money out of the assistant town treasurer line item and put it into part-time, so that you have the flexibility of either hiring an assistant treasurer or hiring some kind of administrative person?
Well, if the money's in there, whether it's in that line or not, it's still in salaries. it could be used for that purpose, whether it's sitting in the assistant treasurer or the temporary part-time.
So by having an assistant treasurer position, we're not locked into having an assistant treasurer and the money not get spent if she decides not to hire an assistant treasurer?
You could use those, I'm going to ask the accountant, you could use those for part-time help.
Yes, the assistant treasurer is appointed by the treasurer. If the treasurer chooses not to appoint an assistant treasurer, and you vote the salary budget because that person's not an elected official, the treasurer can use it for a part-time, temporary consultant.
But if she doesn't want to hire somebody, what I'm saying is, don't you want to have it in a position where the town accountant can, finance director could spend the money, or?
She could agree for it. I mean, the two could agree. The treasurer could agree to do a budget transfer to the town accountant's budget for whatever purpose.
How can a treasurer agree to a transfer of funds from one?
Somebody has to be able to transfer funds between departments.
That's got to be town meeting that makes the transfer.
Right, and one of the things that David and I originally talked about is while the two parties are working it out, perhaps vote it as a finance budget, and brackets indicate it's both town accountant and treasurer. Ultimately, the town accountant's responsible for all budgets, and so is the town administrator. But that provides both parties with flexibility of, if we need an assistant treasurer, the two parties discuss it, and then that assistant treasurer can be appointed. If what we need is clerical, then the two parties can talk about that and then make sure that person's bonded and can do deposits as well. So
That goes back to my saying, based on everything I've heard, I'm a little uncomfortable about establishing a line item funding for an assistant treasurer under the treasurer, because legally that provides less flexibility than to have that shared appropriation. It wouldn't then require a town meeting vote to transfer from one department to another.
correct, it would not require town meeting authority or approval to move between the two parties.
Yeah, that seems like a much better way to go. But that still leaves the budget pretty much as you presented it, and that doesn't address the number of hours for the treasurer, but it addresses the issue of the bigger picture, that there is enough money in the finance function to be sure that somebody gets the job done. And so I think it would be better to have it in, not in the treasurer's budget per se, but in this more general category that wouldn't require a transfer.
I don't know how to do that.
You vote it as the finance department budget, and then you can put in brackets for town meeting. In the omnibus budget, it would say finance instead of indicating town accountant treasurer. You're voting it as finance and showing in brackets for the first year that you do it that represents the accountant and treasurer.
So the funds would be available for the use of the treasurer first, and if not used,
There's flexibility to transfer between the two, or vice versa. If there's times when the treasurer needs additional hours for staff, such as the bonding process, you can do that transfer internally without going back to town meeting to transfer between town accountant and treasurer. If anything, it assists those two departments to work more cohesively.
And you create territorial dispute opportunities under that structure where, geez, I want more of the town accountant's budget under the treasurer budget or whatever.
No, not at all, because you still, underneath the scenes, for reporting purposes, you still have to show the accountant in its UMass identified accounting line items.
Yeah.
And the treasurer's still shown in their
Yeah.
line items.
Okay.
I'm getting it now. Yeah, in Weston, we had a finance department budget, but that didn't mean that the stuff switched between the individual
So if you can work those
sub-departments.
logistics out, that might be
You would have to vote
the
a
most
finance
options open,
budget.
right?
The omnibus budget would need to reflect finance instead of separating those two
But there
departments.
still would be a treasurer budget.
Yes.
And there would be.
And there would be the treasurer, there's a footnote in the omnibus budget showing the elected officials' salaries that, I don't know if those are specifically voted on at town meeting, but they are as part of the
Have to be.
omnibus
No, but it would be
budget.
voted as a finance, so the
Yes.
mechanism of using the approval of the finance department budget as the mechanism to allow the
Yeah.
flexibility to switch between those two departments.
I think I'm sold on what Kitty described in terms of just sort of the total resources, geographically where it goes. You know, this sounds like a great way to address that.
Does this concept still identify a town accountant salary and a treasury salary? Is that the
Yes.
idea?
Yes.
You have, for an elected official, there is a statute that has to be stated, and the voters have to
So
vote that.
you're thinking putting back the treasurer to 42, is that?
No, she was at 15. I'm comfortable with I'm comfortable with the 15 for a number of reasons. My gut,
I was talking dollars. So you're comfortable with these dollar figures?
yes, that we're looking at here, yeah.
But just not having it as an assistant position necessarily?
Well, whatever they were just describing sounds
I think
most
Kitty was,
flexible.
I thought Kitty was
Kitty was talking
advocating
15 and 15.
just combining the two, right?
No, she was just saying keep it at 15 and 15.
Okay.
It's all, yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, I don't want to sound like a lawyer, but
Too late.
you have to set the salary of elected officials. And once you set that salary of elected officials, that salary,
Yeah.
even under the Internal Revenue Service, if somebody, because I ran into this on the state level, where people say, I don't want to take a salary. Well, that's too bad you don't want to take a salary. It's still, you're going to have to pay, you're going to get your W-2, your 1099, everything else, whether you take it or not. So the, because you're entitled to it. So the voters have to set the salary of the elected official, and that's separate from,
Right.
and there's a footnote too, the overall budget. But what they vote for that elected official, that's what the elected official gets paid. And if we have a line item, a third line item, so we have the elected official, we have the town accountant, and then we have this finance
Staff or whatever.
finance staff, whatever they call it, and you put that last position in there, that provides the flexibility to meet the needs, so it gets done. Because so if you can't hire an assistant treasurer because you can't find one and they don't want to work for 9 months, or they don't like this or they don't like that, you can hire a clerical person, come in and do it. You're not stuck.
But again, in that model of doing the finance, there's still a town treasurer budget that identifies what the salary of the elected official is clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think
With
that's
their
what we're talking about
expenses.
now here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to follow Peter's recommendation on that because I'm not the finance person.
In my review of budgets for towns in our size range, I have seen that model used, particularly in towns that are in the 3,500 to 4,500 population, where there's a shared services pool for town hall. So there's definitely precedent for that approach as well. And it must work, at least for those towns, between the treasurer and the town accountant, how to get the work done and have adequate backup and cross-training and things of that nature.
Yeah, so the hours, so it gets back to the hours for the treasurer position. And, if you use Michael's strict analysis, which you can say it's good or bad, but I think it was the best analysis we have. And if you did the math on the hours that he kind of calculated, it comes to something like 8 hours a week or something.
10.
I mean, we got to 10 because you had a squish factor, right? So, but the actual duty, so, and I'm just using that as a
10, 12,
baseline, so I'm getting to 15. I can get to 15 pretty easily and still be comfortable that, if I think of our objective of statutory duties and the higher level and all of that is part of the objective here. And I think to, Pete did a whole bunch more than those statutory duties. And I would argue, yes, he served as, in effect, as a finance director, in many ways. I think he did do a number of clerical tasks that were, could be shifted over, and I think at this stage have been shifted over. So, I'm comfortable with something less than the 22 hours that he was doing. So I can get to the 15 and feel good about that.
Right,
There's
so-
money there.
I second the motion.
Okay. Anything further, any further discussion? What are we voting on? We're voting on.
15 hours, I guess.
And that's all we're voting on, we're not voting on the rest of the finance budget?
No, 15 hours plus a finance line for,
Which includes the other 15 hours here, plus all the
Right.
accounting line?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll third that.
no, the town accountant has a budget, her salary
You're
and
voting
stuff
a-
like that.
you're voting a
She's-
finance
It's
budget
the finance budget, though.
that includes
That's the whole point.
the treasurer with the amendments that you made on the expenses and the accountant as presented there.
Okay. Second.
Okay, good. Moving along. Yeah, and I want to point out, I thought in this, going back to the warrant for a second, because we were presented with this, but I thought we were adding a.
Words to go in.
No, I thought we had an article in here where we were going to keep on the town meeting warrant, the 43C item, right?
Yes.
It's not on here.
And we didn't change Article 15 on page 5, where it said in the event that,
No, we said we didn't, wait.
we don't need it. Okay, I got confused.
Sorry.
So we
Just
don't need
going
that,
back.
we don't need that item.
I think what we said was that Barbara San Andre was coming and maybe she's here.
She's here.
Oh, yeah, let's start
Can
there.
I ask her to come in?
I thought you had a plan on that, Paul.
Okay, go with your plan, whatever
plan
gets us
was
to
not
the
to
right
have the-
place.
That's what I got to.
We're talking 15 and 16, and which one? are we talking about?
Article 14 is gone.
Is that the one you're talking about?
I'm
That was
talking
the
about
43C,
15,
whatever.
Fallback position for the finance director.
That's right.
And you're saying we don't need the fallback position
We do, we're going to put it on the ballot.
for the finance director?
Yes.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the ballot for the treasurer.
Well, that's a different article. But this 43C
Okay,
for the finance director.
so we may not need it.
Was a contingent, and it's contingent because it takes both a ballot question and the adoption of a bylaw.
Okay, so we
And-
don't need to put it on the town meeting warrant.
Barbara
The
says-
article that's here could allow us to make a motion under this article,
Where's the article that's here? Which one?
the one in an earlier version.
Right, because it's not here. That's the problem.
Could allow us to do a full bylaw.
The 43C article is not in this revised warrant, is what I'm telling you.
It was the former Article
say-
14.
Right, and it was going to be 15, it was going to say in the event that Article 14 fails, to see if the town will vote
That's
to
right.
accept.
Article 15 is the 43C.
Right, town meeting doesn't accept 43C. It's the
It doesn't
ballot
say in the-
that accepts 43C. But in order to implement 43C, 43C allows you to adopt a bylaw. What the content of that bylaw is not on the warrant.
Gotcha.
So you don't need an article to accept 43C.
So this is the one you wrote up?
So we took that out,
Okay.
Great.
and
15 comes
so the
out.
question came up, what if the ballot question
If it stays,
passes?
This stays.
Would that screw up the governance committee thing? And the answer is no, because for that ballot question to be
Then we take no action
effective,
on 15.
to be effective,
You need a bylaw.
you need a bylaw.
Now I understand.
So we never get, if governance passes, then we never have to do another bylaw, because we already have a bylaw. So,
All right.
but the ballot question, if governance decides to change, make an amendment, and there's been a lot of going back and forth with amendments, and if you decide, gee, it's too confusing, we're going to pull our article, then we have the backup thing, which allows us to at least get authority to do a bylaw, and then you hopefully will work to
Okay,
come up with a bylaw that would implement the statute.
Were we supposed to have prefatory language on 15?
yes.
I thought that was what we had
We were
discussed.
gonna have in the event.
In the event
right?
that Article 14 fails, to see that. To see it.
Then we would adopt or accept or something.
15 is the tax collector.
No.
No.
15 on this version, Tom. This 15.
That's my point. Article 14 fails.
That's your bylaw article.
Okay, so do you want to leave that in or take it out?
No, that's the one you just said to leave in. But we wanted to say in the event Article 14 fails, right? This was a contingent article.
But he's saying take it out?
I'm
got me-
saying you could do it, you could give governance a year to perfect something and come in the next year, or if you have it in there, they would then have not much time to do what they need to do.
Well, they'd have the time between Article 14's vote and Article 15 being considered.
15 minutes.
Good with that.
We don't have a copy of what you're talking about.
We don't either, so.
It's- Didn't we have
We
a,
shouldn't be talking about it.
we had a stack of warrants somewhere?
All right, so are we keeping 15 in, and we're having it, the words "in the event that 14 fails"?
I think so, and if by town
It
meeting
allows
we
for
don't want to go
discussion.
forward with it, we'll just move no action? What do
All
you
right,
think?
that
Are you comfortable with that?
that puts a lot of pressure on governance, but that's fine,
I bet,
that's fine.
aren't we supposed to have, and aren't you supposed to have, prior to the discussion, 48 hours worth of information prior to this
I
meeting?
don't know, George, we're just trying to get our work done, okay? I'm sorry it doesn't
understand
suit
that,
you,
but-
but we're trying to get our work done.
I understand that you're
Okay.
trying to get the work done, but getting the work done wrong isn't any better than not doing the work.
Okay, thanks, George. Thanks
But
for
I
your
would
advice.
ask you, is
I'm not,
if you're.
I'm not hearing from you anymore. George, that's enough. Thank you.
I'm asking,
Well, then ask a question, George, okay?
the question is, can you modify what you're supposedly supporting without having any information 48 hours in advance of today's meeting?
Legally, yes.
We're talking about the warrant. We're working on the warrant. It's an agenda item on our agenda. We've got an article, we've redrafted the article. Jeannie went and typed it. We're making more changes to that article. It's the same article.
Have we got it?
It's the one that was, the warrant that was emailed to you. It's the same article, hasn't changed.
What
The
number?
number has changed.
It's the
yes.
prior Article
Yeah.
14. They're talking about adding an introduction to say, in the event that
We should have done
what
this as
used
a
to be
workshop.
Article 15 will now
Done
be
it
Article
up
14
here.
fails.
Yeah.
Exasperating.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to,
And didn't we have this word here?
it could be very confusing at town meeting.
What's that?
Other words that we were doing adopting or accepting or something?
No, we're not accepting 43C anymore. That's the whole
All right,
thing.
okay.
Well, do you want to?
Very good.
You think it's not a good idea to put this on? Is that what you're saying?
I think, don't you think it could cause a lot of confusion?
When we talked about this before our executive session, the conclusion was we didn't want to skip a year if the governance task force article didn't go forward. We wanted to be able to propose a consolidated finance department in a different way.
With the addition of that language saying clearly in the event if 14 fails.
Well, that's the idea.
And then you wouldn't do anything with
Yeah, are you saying
15 at
that's too
all.
confusing?
No, I'm saying that might take care of it because
Well, that's
that
what
makes
has
it
to be in
clear.
there.
Yeah. So if 14 fails, then we have another discussion of,
Well, we'd have to have a bylaw at town meeting
right.
to do that.
Right. Yeah.
If we didn't have a bylaw, we'd vote no action. It wouldn't be the first time. Sometimes we vote no action when we do have a bylaw.
So you want to include it?
So
I'm indifferent. I'm reacting to comments that
I
people
don't
made
see how
before
it
that we
hurts.
shouldn't
I
wait.
don't appreciate how it's gonna
Okay,
hurt.
fine, let's include it with the language that's only in the event that,
Article
In the event that Article
14 fails.
which is the language I thought we had put in it before.
Last week.
okay.
And
All right.
also
Tonight.
10 minutes ago, or it's 2 hours ago, whenever it was.
Okay, so can we get that typed and put back in? Diane or
did you
Jean?
say fails or no
You
action?
just wanted to say in the event that Article 14 fails,
Is-
Comma.
see if the town will vote to amend?
Well, or you could say unless Article 14 passes.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's do that, unless Article 14 passes.
Positive note.
See if the town will vote to amend the general bylaw?
Yeah, that article.
Yes,
That's the article.
yes.
If it passes, you don't need this. Is that?
That's the idea.
We hope we don't need it.
That just doesn't make sense.
No.
Yes, it does.
You said unless Article 14 passes.
Yes, comma, and then see if the town will vote to amend the general bylaws. That means if 14 passes, we don't do 15. If 14 fails, then we do vote 15.
This must be good TV tonight.
I'm having a good time.
Just go type it.
Okay.
So you say we can't have a bylaw? Well, that's what I said, between now and town meeting, if we have a bylaw, then we have something to offer at town meeting.
We also have governance right behind you. So the idea is that they know that if their article fails, they have the option of coming up with a modified version of their proposal in the next article.
But we're the proponents of this article, just.
Yes, I understand.
Well, we wouldn't want to put anything up that
They weren't.
they hadn't vetted.
I thought we were through tonight.
I think you're through, almost.
We're just asking you to do fallback position A, fallback position B, fallback position C, so when we get to town meeting, we actually get something done.
Well, you should understand that we looked at 43, chapter 43C and saw lots of problems with it.
Right, but-
DOR has issued some opinions that indicate that they've got some problems with the interpretation of it, so the,
But here's the thing, the 43C only authorizes the town to adopt a bylaw, doesn't say what bylaw. And so what we're saying is, in
it
this
has lots of
article,
other issues as well.
but you can, in your bylaw, specify what you want. And so we're saying to you, in the event that somebody there's a problem, let's say there's a technical problem, or there's too many amendments, and someone said, this is too confusing, this article, I don't understand what governance wants, blah, 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 and no action is taken on that article, here you have another chance to come up with a bylaw that you like, that's hopefully addresses the issue.
So what I'm hearing, though, is that government task force doesn't think there's a bylaw they would like. Is that right?
Well, it's taken us a year to come up with the one that we put in, that you now have at 14. Paul's absolutely right. You're going to suggest that if Article 14 fails, that all of a sudden, we're going to come up with something in Article 15 to authorize to go forward.
It depends on the discussion. If Article 14 fails to pass because someone says you absolutely have to have this language in it, and so that gets defeated,
Yeah.
the next one,
So
put the language in,
is that all you're looking for?
instead of waiting for a year.
In 15?
Is what are you?
Yeah.
That's all you're looking for? Okay.
Well, hopefully, by putting the language in there, that it's only going to be acted on if the governance thing isn't adopted, it's clear that
It's an
Yes, I'm-
incentive to vote for 14.
it's an incentive to vote for, yeah, that puts it in its
Yeah,
most
or
blunt
you're
way.
back, or you're back where you were 3 years ago, when you get too many articles on and you're creating too much confusion. I think you've sort of talked me out of it, Paul, the more you've explained it. I'm getting confused. I mean, and I think it's going to be confusing for town meeting at this point.
Confusing? You think?
I think I'm getting to that point.
I'm not passionate either way, but
So if we have to go for success on 14 and absent
Absent
success,
that,
we're back to the drawing board next
I
November.
really, really, really want 14.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a ballot question. So the ballot question.
Yeah, so we could do a bylaw the following year. That's the whole
Then you
thing.
do the bylaw the following year. So then you have to ask a group or this committee to continue for a year to implement
Or we just steal it from some other town.
what we could copy from other towns.
All right, so I yanked it.
All right, Gene, we're not doing 15 anymore. You got to renumber all of them.
I told you.
No, we just want to see how fast you were.
I'm gonna go to, so we're leaving 15, it's gone?
Gone.
Done?
Gonzo.
I'll be back.
And what are we doing on 16?
Oh, that's,
No, let's not go back over anything we haven't already done.
All right, we're good with
We
what we
address
got, is what
14
you're saying.
so that we're in agreement?
Yeah, is there something wrong with 14?
There's nothing wrong with 14, but you asked us to come back to you. We we, thanks to Barbara, we came up with the language that addressed the open meeting law.
Good, can you, why don't you walk us through that, so we, since, if you don't mind, or Barbara or somebody.
Will you allow George to speak?
Yeah, that'd be great. George will speak.
Don't do it.
Oh, it's great when he speaks when you want him to speak. It's great.
We'll allow George to speak.
I never do that, had to be silent.
That's what he says, huh?
And thanks for being patient and for helping too, that was helpful.
Give me the big chair. No, I don't like the big chair. Bring the straight chair. Thank you. I keep thinking I'm gonna get my last 2 cents in, so I'll try to get 2 cents in.
Yeah, that was a valid one.
Once again, I'll thank the committee, Ron Arrigo, George Shea, Rob Tierney, who had to go home to take care of children, and Chuck Yon. And I want a special thanks to Barbara St. Andre, who turned my request on Friday and had it back to us on Monday, so it'd be in the 48-hour packet. I'm very grateful. And she, the question we asked was how we could eliminate the open meeting law conflicts within the language we had given to you last week. And I will turn that now over to George, because he's had the most conversations on it. And he's not playing games on his iPad.
Now I got it all yellowed out.
Okay.
Essentially, what it boiled down to is if the E, F, and G remain the way it was presented to you at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, Paul was correct. If that committee had the final
Can you say that
authority-
again? I didn't hear that. Say that again.
I recognize correctness when I see it. And when I question it, I firmly believe that you're wrong. So we'll move away from that attempted jest on his part, and we'll move to the fact that if the committee itself had the authority to do what G suggested, integrated computer system, integrated finance, then it was...
That's section F. Yeah.
Then it would be subject to the open meeting law. So we asked the town council to provide us with some way around subjecting it, what essentially was an administrative committee, to the public meeting law. And she did that, and that's what you have in front of you now. Not that we question town council at any time, but I called the AG's office and read them the language, and they said it would make it. We would not be subject, with that language, we would not be subject to the open meeting law.
Are you saying I was right?
Yes.
I just want that right.
I didn't hear him say that.
I said that the AG's office said she was right. I didn't say that. Then I got an anonymous email that indicated that this particular modification made by town council, learned town council, had been used in other locations for a variety of reasons. Either the TA used it or the finance director used it to bring in consultants. Paul's recognition of the superintendent using the same authority was in the manual, the AG's manual on open meeting law. So, I mean, it seemed to me that after we got all finished with going around everywhere we went, we changed the language just enough to get away from the open meeting law and to keep the underlying premise of a team, even though it wasn't named as a team, intact. That's what we did.
Yeah, fundamentally shifted it from being a decisional authority to being a coordinating and advisory function, which is exactly what we talked about with you, I think, a week ago.
And it says in consultation with and considering the recommendations.
Yes.
So there's some strong language in there
Right.
that shows what the town wants to happen, which is great.
Right. And E and G have some other minor changes, but,
Well, E&G essentially took out all references to a team.
right,
That's what it did.
yeah.
So that the concept of team was no longer in existence, and that, again, was the town council's recommendation.
Thank you. This works, I think.
So I support this as amended.
Yeah, this
so
is
I
fine, and they-
move that we support it as amended.
Is that because I said you were right?
Yes.
All those in favor?
And you got Barbara's vote, you got Barbara's vote too.
Good, thank you. Thanks, this is great. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, thank you. All right.
Are we
On
on
to
to,
another
you're gonna
executive
withdraw
session.
The only,
15, right?
The only thing that was left on there was review Board of Selectmen model, which we've done by default.
Just about.
If you wanted to review the town budget model and revenue assumptions tonight, we could do that. Thank you.
Well, I think you need to, just speaking to Irene, be prepared to, you're gonna be providing, you know, the model here for the advisory session, and you also need to have that second page with the break, not this second page, but the one that has the free cash and all the other stuff in there, so that we're capturing the, you know, the reserve, I don't know, revenue fund transfers or whatever the heck we're doing, the supplementals listed out and so forth. So and I don't know where we're at on those. So that's something that we may have to touch base on before public hearing, right?
I think we have something to get on that.
Or if you could send that out. You know, so, because questions I have on your, I think we have more changes, Jeannie.
I need the whole.
Irene, on your revenue, the thing you provided, you know, you need to be able to explain what you're doing on the updated forecast fees for things like fees, licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, because you got some numbers that, you know, to be able to justify those miscellaneous recurring things like that. I'm sure you have that. It doesn't sound like we have time for that, but, and also what we're doing on cell towers during this fiscal year, since that'll come on stream and so forth. So I presume you got all that in there, right? So those are just my key things, and looking at that free cash box, for me, is very key to see, and I think some of the folks in advisory.
So can I move that we issue the warrant as amended as printed by our staff?
Second on that?
I'm gonna second that.
Okay. Further discussion?
Where's Jeannie?
I really hope not.
So we have all these amended pages in front of us based
Yes.
on the discussion today.
All in favor of the issuing the warrant? Aye. Okay, great.
I want to point out that you're way ahead of last year.
How many days ahead of last year are we?
Last year, we were still wrapping up after the advisory hearing, so,
So that's pretty good.
yeah.
Change every article that they voted to not adopt.
Yeah, who was the chair last year? We got it right last year, though, right?
It was correct.
The number of articles you
How
said?
many warrant articles are there now?
There are 29 warrant articles.
And having missed some of the discussion, what was the other article you brought? The one I started with is 39.
The one you started with is 31.
Yeah.
One of them had been dropped last time and was mistakenly
The charter?
put in. It was the charter.
Commission.
So you dropped that one too?
Earlier this evening, the old Article 18 was dropped.
Okay, thank you. That gets me down to 28.
And then the collective bargaining dropped.
The collective bargaining was taken out. It used to be the old Article 4, I think.
So we have advisory, they'll figure this.
So can we adjourn to executive session, or is there, do we have to?
We have to set our next meeting as March 26th, if everybody's okay with that?
Well, we're posted for the 21st.
Oh, I'm sorry, the next meeting is the 21st at advisory, that's correct, sorry. But you're right.
Yeah. And then the 26th is Thursday night. So we're posted for 8 o'clock on the 21st, Mary?
I just was wondering if I can make a request for one of you gentlemen, or David as your proxy, to come to our advisory committee meeting on the 18th, just to give the people who didn't benefit from this lively discussion this evening, your thoughts on the various articles.
And what time is that?
That is at 7 p.m.
Okay. Yep.
Because there have been some changes and just
Yep.
like to hear
Okay.
it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe Diane should post just in case if you want reinforcements.
Yeah, I told Mary that I would attend.
Sorry, I missed that for when.
Next Wednesday?
Post for the advisory meeting just in case you want to attend.
What day is that?
It's a Wednesday, right, Mary? That's
Yes.
next Wednesday night?
Next Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
The advisory is what, all day Saturday and then Monday also, you said, or?
Well, Monday is the backup, please.
Okay, good. I don't want Monday either.
Only if we
18th?
need it.
We're talking about?
For advisory, just to post it if we wanted.
Okay.
Yeah, just,
Yes, so Diane, you'll post the 18th?
Yes, I'll do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
just, one of you is enough, but if all of you want to come, that's great.
You're
You know
happy to
how
see
much
us?
better it is when we're all here.
That came across as one of you is more than what we want.
No, I would never say that. I would never say that.
Very good. So I'm going to make a motion to go into executive session since we have town council here. Well, I've got to make the actual motion, right? Don't I?
Yep, you can read it.
Where's my motion?
Here, I got one here.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think that's it.
It is. I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, real property, and contract negotiations, and I so declare that having these discussions in open session may have a detrimental effect on the outcome. One, to discuss potential litigation as it pertains to health agent, GL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3 and 7, and Suffolk Construction v. DCAM, and to consider the purchase, exchange, or value of real property as it pertains to the Peace Abbey land swap pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A, 6 and 7, and Suffolk Construction v. DCAM, and union contract negotiations with CM&D, AFL, CIO, State Council 93, Locals 335, pursuant to GL Chapter 38, Section 21A2. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Motion seconded by Mr. Caruso. Having a second, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
Votes aye.
Mr. Caruso.
Aye.
Mr. General, aye. Having passed by a vote of 3-0, the open session is now closed. We will not be returning to public session. We are now in executive session.